Hey everyone, and welcome to Chef AJ Live. I'm your host, Chef AJ, and this is where I introduce you to amazing people like you who are doing great things in the world that I think you should know about. Today is the second Sunday of the month, which means it's time for Nutrition Insights with Dr. Peter Rogers. And today he is going to tell you how you can age better than your spouse. Please welcome Dr. Peter Rogers. What a fun topic, Dr. Rogers.
Hey, thanks.
Well, I think one way to age better than them is to just marry somebody like a lot older.
Yeah, that's the fastest way.
Yeah. Well, this is great, but are there differences though in like sexes, how well a man ages versus a woman, or is it all
Oh,
lifestyle?
there's a couple things. The reason, like, why do women live longer than men? It's because they menstruate. It's a therapeutic phlebotomy every month, and by doing so, they lower their hematocrit, which makes their blood less thick, lower viscosity of the blood, so that lowers their blood pressure. In addition, every month when they menstruate, they have new red blood cells coming out of the bone marrow. When red blood cells first come out of the bone marrow, they're more flexible, more deformable. Typical RBC is about 7 microns, capillary is about 5 microns, so they have to deform to pass through the capillary. And being more deformable, they're more flexible to get through there, so you can push them through in a lower pressure. The reason you have a blood pressure is to get oxygen to the top of your brain, your supratentorial brain, cerebral cortex there. And so what I'm saying is, if you're pumping a thin solution like water, you have a lower pressure than if you're pumping thick blood. So the thicker the blood, the higher the pressure has to be. And so thus women avoid hypertension until they're postmenopausal. So they get this big advantage on men. Men in the Western society start developing atherosclerosis, like in their 20s. So that's a big advantage.
There was a doctor on the show that said the reason men die first is because they're married to women.
Oh yeah, that's the other joke. How come? Yeah, because they're not married to women.
Are you familiar with a doctor who's been on my show a few times? He's almost 101. His name is Dr. John Scharfenberg.
Oh yes, I've seen his videos. They're nice.
I mean, I used to work in the field of healthcare as an activity director of a retirement home. And there were people that were already going downhill in their 70s and 80s. But I know him personally. He drives himself a little red sports car. He drives himself from Northern California to Palm Springs. He flies to Malaysia. I mean, he doesn't appear to have any cognitive impairment I've never seen anything like this in a person his age.
Yeah, I actually think if you have good health habits, people can age extraordinarily well. And so that's the goal to pursue, because like the average person tends to say, well, I'm not as fat as my cousin, and they're happy with that. But what you really should be saying to yourself is, what's the best I could do?
Well, you tell us, Dr. Rogers.
Okay, I got a lot of insights. I got some, I think, interesting new information here as well.
Can't wait to see it.
You want me to share my screen and get my talk on? Okay,
Absolutely.
Let me put my talk on here. Start from the first slide.
I'll let you know when it's up.
Okay, so now I'm sharing my screen. Share desktop. Okay. Share. You seen it?
Nope. Make sure it's up first and then share.
Okay, I got the share thing and I clicked the share button.
There you go.
Okay. So this lady here is Annette Larkin, and she is considered the most beautiful grandmother in the world. This is her when she's 70 years old, and it's an interesting story. She was on a bunch of TV news channels in the past. Her husband owned like a delicatessen butcher shop or something like that. A meat store is what she usually calls it. And she found it kind of disgusting, and she became a vegan because of that. And so, becoming a vegan, she aged super well. She exercises a lot. And her husband looks like a typical 70-year-old American. He's overweight, and, they mentioned it in all the videos. He's got the usual Westerner type medical conditions. Okay, so Annette Larkin, there we go. Okay, so I can just click here. Let me go to presenting. All right. So here's a poem. Jack Sprat could eat no fat. His wife could eat no lean. Between them both, they licked the platter clean. So yeah, there's a low-fat diet and there's a high-fat diet. Okay, another comment I've heard is that in the battle of the sexes, the woman fights from a battleship and the man fights from a rowboat. Woman's got some big advantages in marriage. Typically the guy wants to make the two-back beast more than she does. And if they get divorced, she knows she comes out of it better. So she's in a pretty confident position there. You know, there can be side effects of that though, too. A lot of men are lazy around the house. You know, they figure it's her house anyways. So why should I do anything? Plus, we're not much for being picker-uppers. Okay, now here is, you know, the magic ring. Okay, one ring to rule all of him. Herbert Spencer had said, at the wedding ceremony, the woman gets a ring on her finger, the man gets one in his nose. The most happy marriage, according to Samuel Taylor Coleridge, would be a deaf man to a blind woman. Okay, you know, I was trying to understand psychology better. You know, my interpersonal skills weren't the best. So I'm reading about psychology and I come across B.F. Skinner, behaviorism, you know, trying to control people with rewards and punishments, and the invention of the Skinner box, where they put a dumb animal into a box and they give it a lever to get food pellets, and then they also intermittently shock it sometimes. And I thought to myself, what a waste of time. This is stupid. It has nothing to do with my life. Why am I wasting my time reading this? And then I had a eureka moment that my family home, it's like a Skinner box. My wife is a trainer and I'm the dumb animal. Do as I say. Nagging sex, nagging sex. You got 3 minutes. That's it. Now give me all your money. So the Skinner box. Okay, a couple tips for the guys on how to argue with a wife. Well, first of all, a couple quotes. Camille Pagula, she said that teenage boys have only a brief little season of exhilarating liberty between the control of their mothers and then the control of their wives. Jules Renard, the Frenchman, love is like an hourglass. When the heart fills, the mind empties. Samuel Butler, he said that brigands demand your money or your life. A wife wants both. The philosophy of Zsa Zsa Gabor. I'm a very good housekeeper. Every time I divorce a man, I keep his house. A man is incomplete until he's married, then he's finished. You never really know a man until you've divorced him. I love intellectual men. They know everything and suspect nothing. Rodney Dangerfield asked the question, what's the difference between an arranged marriage versus marrying for love? You can spend the rest of your life blaming your parents instead of yourself. Ben Franklin said, before marriage, a young man should have his eyes wide open. After marriage, it's probably best off if he keeps them half shut. One of my residency doctor professors said, if you put a jelly bean into a jar for every time you had sex during courtship and the first 3 years of marriage, and then you took one out for every time you had sex after that, you would never empty the jar. Rule number one, arguing with a wife. If you know you're going to lose, act really disappointed, and then you sort of get points for future discussions. Rule number two, ask yourself what really matters in a situation. And if you can get her chasing the wrong thing, you can still come out ahead. So for example, I had to negotiate who gets what bathroom, you know, the parental bathroom, the parental closet. And I knew I was going to lose, but you know what? I actually secretly wanted to, because by me having to go up and down stairs all day, I get much better physical fitness from that. It helps me to age better than you know who. All right, now here's a nice painting. This is the Fountain of Youth by Lucas Cranach. So the old people start on one side, they go through the Fountain of Youth, they come out on the other side all youthful and ready for fun. Okay, now here's a question. You know, you always want to ask yourself, what are my goals? What am I objectively pursuing? And I like this scene from the movie Amadeus, one of the greatest movies of all time. It's the greatest movie ever about creativity, where he's speaking to the emperor and he's explaining a scene from the Marriage of Figaro where there's like a polyphony of multiple voices. And he's like, how long do you think I can extend this? And what I'm trying to say is, what is the holy grail of optimal health? There's a tendency, kind of an internal medicine tendency, to say optimal health is clean coronary arteries. And yes, that is good. And then the other thing they'll tend to say is, well, what's good for the heart is good for the brain. But there's actually a lot more things the brain cares about. Another point of view of optimal health, especially for young guys, they want physical strength. Some endurance athletes, they want endurance. Good to have some of both. Some people want beauty, you know, vitality. And having a vegan diet, for example, low-fat diet with all the vasodilators and everything that goes with it, the potassium, the sodium, the magnesium. I'm sorry, not the sodium, the potassium, the magnesium, and the nitrates. You get a glow of vitality about your skin. It makes you look good. Optimal cognitive performance is also a form of optimal health. Good concentration, clear thought. Optimal longevity, of course, is a commonly talked about thing. And the big question is, can we get all of the above? And I think so, because I think they all pretty much go together. Okay, but what I'm doing here is I'm extending the concept beyond just a clean coronary. Okay, here's a little bit about the immune system. You know, it starts out, you have what's called the innate immune system, which is basically a barrier system to anything. a gate. You don't get past the skin. You don't get past the intestinal lining. Then right behind it are the guard cells, the macrophages, and also called dendritic cells. Dendritic means like a tree, dendron tree, and they have little projections that stick up above the mucosal layer, the epithelium, so to speak. And the point I'm making is they then will catch the antigen. Let's say it's an invading bacteria. They'll process it, and then it'll activate the other cells of the immune system with the adaptive system, which is against a specific bacteria, for example. And it's so amazing. There's like billions of these cells, and they all read each other by a Braille mechanism of feeling their surface proteins, for example, and they know what's going on. It's extraordinary. The more you think about it, to me, it makes me believe in God. It's just too incredible and extraordinary to have happened any other way. Believe me, the more I learn about complex biology, the brain, the eye, the clotting system, the immune system, the more amazed I am how complex and interesting and brilliant it is. Okay, part of what got me interested in this subject is I look at a lot of brains and a lot of necks. And when I look at a neck, I noticed that the lymph nodes, the older the patient gets, the smaller the lymph nodes are. And it's a big deal to me because there's a criteria for lymph node biopsy. By the way, I've done like thousands of procedures in the neck. Okay. And what would happen is patients would keep on getting sent over to me for biopsy with what I would consider normal lymph nodes because they're young. And being young, they have big lymph nodes so they call them by criteria as abnormal. And the reason it happens is the criteria came out of like Peter Sam and some other ear, nose, and throat surgeons. They were measuring the lymph node size in people with squamous cell carcinoma of the head and neck. And based on certain criteria, the lymph node was more likely to be cancerous, even if it had normal shape, normal morphology. But young people routinely had lymph nodes that big. So I spent a long time thinking about why do lymph nodes shrink. And I also had some interesting experiences. I had a lady doctor friend of mine who worked in a hospital next to a Chinatown in the big city. Okay. And she noticed the brains of these old Chinese people looked fantastically good. They were what you would call tight brains. When we say tight brain, we mean that the brain is up against the skull because there's almost no atrophy. Young people almost always have tight brains. So these old people had tight brains. Here's a typical, demented person I see with a sort of shrunken atrophic brain. There's expansion of the CSF space between the skull right here and the brain parenchyma itself. Okay, so I'm wondering, why do they have such great looking brains? These are old time Chinese people eating the old rice diet, 1% of calories from fat and white rice. So I'm thinking that's probably it. Now, there's a bunch of different theories of dementia. I've talked about those in other lectures. By the way, if you want to see any of my other lectures, just go to Chef AJ's playlist button and you can click. I've got a whole bunch of lectures here. I want it to be something that'll stand the test of time, like Thucydides, not just a lecture for the moment, but, for a long time, quality material. So I think if you go to them, I think you'll find there's a lot of information there. Okay, so basically I was thinking about what's going on. And what I'm getting at here is I haven't finalized this opinion, but it seems to be the case that the same things that shrink the brain and make people stupid, cognitively impaired, are the same things shrinking the lymph nodes. Because you're going to hear blanket statements, like you'll hear Caldwell-Esselstyn say, well, the older a person gets, the less endothelial nitric oxide vasodilator they have. But there's always generalizations based on a population. There's some things that certainly happen with aging no matter what you do. But you accelerate the bad stuff when you live with poor habits and you eat a poor diet. But by the same token, if you have good habits and a good diet, you can extend the functionality, okay? Like Chef AJ was talking about Dr. Scharfenberg, okay, how great he looks at 100 years of age. And there's been plenty of other people. Jack LaLanne was looking strong and good in his 90s. A lot of people age really well. Like a lot of those people in southern Japan were aging fantastically well. All right, so anyways, what else got my attention? When people are stressed out, anything that increases cortisol stresses the immune system and suppresses it. And it's because cortisol bumps up with the stress response so you can survive the next 5 minutes. Being chased by a tiger in the dark, climb a tree or something. You don't worry about long-term interest when you're just trying to survive. So you want to control your psychological stress and avoid things that increase it, like sleep deprivation and caffeine, and you will have better immune function. And the reason you want to have good immune function is not just to prevent the bacterial infection, it's to prevent cancer. What do you think removes cancer from your body? It's your immune system. So you want to optimize your immune system. Okay, there's other things that can confuse your immune system. Sodium can cause some hyperactivity of the immune system in a bad way and increase the risk of asthma. My brother had that. And it kind of messed up his high school I'm sorry, his college athletic career. He's state champion high school as a wrestler, and then in college he's a bit of a disappointment. Wasn't even an All-American. Should have been a national champion. Then he became a vegetarian in his 40s, and then he became a world champion in some of that MMA stuff, which I think is a little crazy, but he's great at it. Okay, interesting things too, getting me thinking about the immune system. Dr. McDougall gave a very interesting lecture on Chef AJ's channel here about hyperstimulation of the immune system by eating, animal foods, leading to increased risk of lymphoma. So that was pretty interesting. Eating, plant-based diets decrease the risk of lymphoma. So that would imply maybe that, improves immune system function. It certainly seems to do so. There's other interesting thing like the Dr. Ornish study showing that telomeres usually shorten, but they can lengthen. I think that was largely stressed. I got to get to reading about that. I've been working so much, I haven't had as much time to read all this stuff. I'm going to do a more extensive study of the immune system and come back to it. But there's additional interesting things here. And there's actually something big going on with Dr. Ornish. His research study about using a plant-based diet for patients with cognitive impairment, I think that just got published like in the last couple of days. So you might want to check that out. That's going to be a big story. Okay, now let's look at what happens in your blood when you go plant-based diet. If you compare the blood labs of a plant-based diet, a vegan, to somebody eating the SAD diet, standard American diet, the standard American diet is worse for everything. I'm not aware of anything that they're better at, not a single thing. This picture, by the way, is a bit of a joke. What's the worst side effects of, eating a vegan diet? Yeah, you got to take B12, whoop-de-doo, okay? And one of them is you become so skinny, you age a lot better than your spouse gets jealous. Number two, you look so good, you fall in love with yourself. This is Narcissus, the Greek myth. He fell in love with his reflection in the water. He couldn't stop staring at himself. This lady here, Echo, was a nymph who fell in love with him, but Echo had a problem. She pissed off Zeus's wife, and Zeus's wife made it so she couldn't talk other than to repeat the last thing someone else said. So she had a hard time convincing Narcissus to run off with her instead of staring at his reflection. But anyways, be that as it may, what's my point? My point was that you look so good compared to your spouse, that might make things awkward at home. In addition, what I've noticed is, I'm the vegan out of my family, is that I'm skinnier than everybody else, and I'm always cold compared to where they want the temperature. They always want the thermostat of the house like 5 or 10 degrees warmer than me. So I got to walk around with a t-shirt, a sweatshirt, and then 2 jackets on top of that, sometimes a hat. All right, so anyways, getting back to these labs, vegans have lower white blood cell count, and I believe it's just because they have less systemic inflammation, okay? And that's also good for your blood pressure, because every time, your typical red blood cells about 7 microns, capillaries about 5 microns. White blood cells on average, they're bigger, like 14 microns, okay? They're big, so it's hard to push them through a capillary. So, your pressure is going to go up. You have a higher white blood cell count. It might decrease tissue oxygenation a little bit. You're trying to stuff those big fat white blood cells through those small capillaries. You get a lowering of your C-reactive protein, which is a generalized indicator of systemic inflammation, inflammation of the whole body. There's actually a little controversy about what it really does. I can tell you Gregory Sloop, the best atherosclerosis researcher in the world, he thinks it's more of a myokine, meaning that it's a signal to the body that the skeletal muscle cells are not able to adequately increase their glycogen storage. So myokine means a signaling molecule that moves away from the muscle. And he might be right. I'm not positive about that one way or the other, but either way, it's bad to have elevated CRP, and it's lower in vegans. Okay, you get elevated total cholesterol, elevated LDL cholesterol in meat eaters, okay? And we talked about this before. The LDL cholesterol, positively charged, overcomes the zeta potential, meaning the negative charge in the external surface of red blood cells, so it sticks them together, blood pressure goes up. You get elevated triglycerides, VLDLs, and other very low density lipoprotein. You get more fatty liver, you get more insulin resistance, you get more diabetes, pumping thick blood, you get more high blood pressure, everything bad. You get fatter, they have higher BMI. So the vegans are better at every single thing. That's why don't let anybody try to tell you this paleo, keto, carnivore, low carb stuff. It's nonsense, okay? It's just a way to trick the proles. Think about it. You got to keep the proles, the average, stupid person, you got to keep them fat and sick if you want to keep making money off them. Nobody makes money off of low-fat vegans, okay? I don't go to the doctor. I don't take any pills. So you got to make people dependent in order to sell them stuff. Say, oh, look, you're sick. You need this high blood pressure pill. You need this other pill. You need this diabetes medication. Okay, so big money don't want the proles to be skinny and healthy. There's no money in that. Okay, they got better kidney function. They got less coronary artery disease, less impotence, etc. And also by eating the fiber, they avoid leaky gut. And then they subsequently avoid postprandial endotoxemia, meaning the bacterial endotoxins getting into the blood, which are quite prothrombotic. I'll show you some pictures of that in just a little bit. So they get less autoimmune disease. And also their blood's less prone to clotting, which is what you want. Because there's a tendency, you know, in the movies, you think, oh, so-and-so bled to death. Okay, that's in the movies. In real life, almost everybody dies from clotting, okay? You clot off an artery in the heart, that's a heart attack, myocardial infarction. You clot one off in the brain, that's a stroke. And you clot one off in other places, you make tissue ischemic, hypoxic, not getting enough oxygen. You increase the risk of having a mitochondrial injury due to the hypoxia, and then the cell either dying or transforming itself into functioning like an anaerobic bacteria. That's the metabolic theory of cancer. And that the cell basically stops running primarily on aerobic oxygen-based metabolism, runs anaerobically to become like a anaerobic bacteria, and then it grows out of control like a bacteria, you know, a prokaryote rather than a eukaryote. All right, abdominal pressure syndrome from the lack of fiber. There's no fiber in meat. There's very little in processed food. So, okay, here was Dr. McDougall's lecture with Chef AJ, and this is where he's talking about increased incidence of lymphomas after a paper by Alan Cunningham in 1977. And the thought was that it's hyperstimulating the immune system, and the immune system sometimes sort of gets out of control and just keeps replicating. So lymphoma is big lymph nodes, okay? And then they get a bunch of big lymph nodes in their neck, and I have to do a biopsy, a core biopsy of them. Okay, and then there's a lot less lymphomas when a person eats plant-based diet, especially the vegetables. Fruits help too, but especially the vegetables. All right, so you see where this is all going. Now, here's a lady I think is quite interesting. This lady's name is Dr. Lydia Lynch. She's a PhD in the immunology department at Harvard. And her group started studying the effect of fat on the immune system. First of all, she noticed whatever fat you feed the mice, for example, they all make them fat. It doesn't matter what type of fat it's. All fat makes the animals fat. And it's the same thing for humans. All right, but she also noticed more than that. That she noticed that the more fat they were fed, and also the more obese the mouse was, the more it would inhibit the immune system and increase cancer growth. Okay, so this is important because a lot of people, you know, they keep trying to tell you good fats and all this other stuff. In my opinion, there's no such thing as good fats. That's all nonsense. Okay, yes, there are 2 essential fats. You know, you got an omega-6 and omega-3 essential fat, but you get enough of those just eating plant foods. They all have a little bit of those fats. You get enough just from eating them. You don't need to go seeking them out. That's my opinion based on a lot of study. Okay, so now this is that same lady, Lydia Lynch, her lecture, and she's saying, look, if you have an obese person, they sort of leak more free fatty acids into the blood. And if they eat a high-fat diet, they get more free fatty acids in the blood. Those do some things you do not want. They go to the immune system and they suppress the cytotoxic T cells. Those are the ones that remove cancer cells. Those are the ones that kill the bacteria to protect you from the infections. So that's a big deal. And then they actually increase what are called Tregs, T regulator cells, and those suppress the immune system. You don't want that. This increases tumor growth, not good. Okay, and of course, the more fat is going to cause diabetes and all the sequelae of diabetes, including immune suppression. All right, so I find it interesting. There's actually has started a new field. There's a new field in medicine. It's called immunometabolism. And so it's the effect of metabolism, primarily diet, on the immune system function. So that's good news. And it's correlating what we already knew, but it's nice to see it being correlated. So here's a slide of her showing a cytotoxic T cell, NK cell and cytotoxic T cell, same thing. So it's attaching to the target cell, forms a connection with it, and it'll perforate its plasma membrane and cause the target cell to die. All right, so what she said, though, is the fat paralyzes the cytotoxic T cells, so they can't do their job. They can't remove the tumor cells. Not good. Neil Bernard, the expert nutrition guy, he had a nice quote on this. He said, he wasn't talking about this slide in particular, but he just had a general quote about how high-fat diets suppress the immune system. He said, the immune system can't work well in an oil slick. So that really sort of captures the problem in one quote. Here's something nice that came out of True North Health Center. They published a case report that they had a patient, a 42-year-old woman with a stage 3A lymphoma. So that's pretty far along, 3A. And basically, it's a type of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. There's like 2 main categories of lymphoma, Hodgkin's and non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. So anyways, after doing a 21-day water-only fast, her lymph nodes were substantially reduced in size. They shrunk. And she even came back for a 9-month follow-up, and the nodes were still not palpable. So that's a prolonged result. That's wonderful news. So I don't know the long-term follow-up on it, but it is implying that the fasting had a very beneficial effect. And this brings up the thought, well, Could there be a way to understand this better and maybe get a more generalized benefit from it? Sounds promising. All right, now I'm going to show you another guy. I'm showing you all these guys so you can get a sense of what's happening in the immune world, because it's very interesting. Here's a guy named Luke O'Neill. He's an Irish biochemist. And I thought this was a good slide. Oh, actually, part of where he got this idea was from Nav Chandel. Nav Chandel is a very smart biochemist, like in Northwestern in the Chicago area. And he said, you know what? Let me see. I've kind of got this toolbar hiding my words here. He said, metabolism is the driver. Genes are the passenger. Now, that seems like a little statement. It's a big statement, because conventional medicine always tries to act like everything is due to genes and aging and stuff. No, no, no. And what I'm trying to say is genes are something you cannot control. That takes your power away. Metabolism is something you can control. And so that empowers you as the individual to try to change your metabolism. This was a very funny movie, by the way. It's Planes, Trains, and Automobile with Steve Martin and John Candy. John Candy was really funny. He's one of my favorite comedian actors. Okay, a couple other thoughts here. I got some other quotes over here. Luke O'Neill, the biochemist, he says, I grabbed this pen from my toolbar by accident. I don't want to write anything. Okay, he says, mitochondria are the powerhouses of immunity. They are right in the center of it. Well, that's an important statement. So here's a guy who devoted his whole life to researching immune function, and he says mitochondria in the center of it. Well, what have I been saying for a long time? And you want to talk about dementia? Yeah, fine. There are neurotoxins. Yeah, fine. The vascular hypothesis, the Jack Delatory, the mouse equivalents. Yeah, fine. The Tetsumori Yamashima theory of omega-6 cooking oils leading to toxic aldehydes, hydroxynonenal, destroying brain cells. That's all true. But what I'm saying is mitochondria and calcium metabolism are the main thing I believe is causing brain damage. Okay, and here's what an internal medicine doctor said to me. And so I'm just telling you this, that this guy who's devoted his life to studying the immune system says the key issue is what's happening with those mitochondria. That's right in the center of all the problems, good or bad. Okay, so here's what the internal medicine doc said to me. He goes, Pete, you figured it out. After seeing your slides on the roads that lead, all roads lead to calcium, and the stuff about potassium and sodium ratios and the ion pumps, it all makes sense. It's a coherent unifying theory of pathophysiology. Cytoplasm concentration of calcium and mitochondrial function are what we should be focusing on. Instead, we're giving all these patients drugs, many of which inhibit the mitochondria and increase cytoplasm calcium. Drug-based medicine for chronic disease is stupid. Okay. So let's see if my thing is working here. Oh gosh, I got to get off this pen here. I grabbed this pen tool. I don't even want the pen tool. All right, I'll just use my other way to advance the slide. Okay, here's another lady I'd like you to just know about. Her name is Maria Mittelbrun, and she is from Spain. And she's come to the conclusion from her research that the immune system is what controls aging. She thinks that anything that's damaging to the immune system tends to be damaging to aging, makes people die prematurely. Her first statement is that good inflammation is localized. It's transient. You know, you stub your toe and it heals. You get a little infection, you get a splinter, it gets infected in your hand or your foot. It localized immune response, cures the problem, well controlled. Bad inflammation is systemic, chronic, poorly controlled. Well, doesn't it make sense? Lack of dietary fiber causing leaky gut, causing the entry of bacterial endotoxins, LPS from gram-negative bacteria, TA from gram-positive bacteria, causing systemic inflammation, activating toll-like receptors number 4, and then just setting all these immune system problems in motion unnecessarily. So eat your fiber and don't do the things that cause leaky gut, and you can avoid all this. Okay, so that's the damaging thing. That's where you get that term inflammaging, you know, inflammation associated with aging. And listen to what she says. Mitochondrial damage tends to occur with aging, and the older the mouse, the more damage the mitochondria it had, and the more immune dysfunction problems. So what I was getting back to earlier is the older people, as their lymph nodes all shrink, their immune system is shrinking, and they're less able to fight off cancer. First thing is you see in the top of their chest, you have something called the thymus. And the thymus is where the T cells mature for the adaptive immune system. Adaptive immune system has 2 main cell types. It has B cells, those are the ones that make antibodies, and it has T cells. Those are the ones that do a lot of the direct work, cytotoxic T cells to remove cancer cells, to remove bacteria. So basically, the thymus atrophies when you hit adulthood, and then you have less ability to keep on making new T cells. So you want to be as healthy as you can to maintain that T cell immune function. Okay, here's her paper, one of her papers, Maria Mittelbrun. So she's a bright lady. I think she's doing really good research. Dysfunctional mitochondrial induced multimorbidity means make you sick in multiple ways and cause premature senescence. So they age you rapidly. Okay, and there's other papers from other research groups that are finding the same thing. So you're going to want to optimize your immune function to age better, age longer, be healthier. So what do? Avoid the excessive dietary fat, and you'll also be skinnier to maintain a healthy body weight. Avoid excess dietary sodium. It's a vasoconstrictor. So anything that makes tissues hypoxia is going to potentially damage your mitochondria. Avoid acidic things, okay? Excessive sodium chloride. The chloride is a negative charged anion. The ions that have a negative charge are called anions, and it'll cause, they have to maintain the same amount of ions in the blood and in the cells. Otherwise, you run into osmotic problems that can lead to cell swelling. Okay, so anyways, what that means is excessive dietary chloride from excessive sodium chloride can cause some displacement of the bicarbonate ions, which is a pH buffer in the blood, and then lead to a low-grade metabolic acidosis. Not good, okay? Excessive protein intake, especially animal protein, predisposes to a low-grade metabolic acidosis. Not good, okay? The tumor microenvironment wants acidity. That enables the cancer cell to outcompete the surrounding normal cells. So an alkaline diet facilitates having a better, more basic pH in the tumor microenvironment, tumor milieu, and that helps the normal surrounding cells to compete with the cancer cells. Okay, it's good to stay warm. Think about it. What happens when you're really sick? You get a fever. That fever helps the immune system to fight the infection. And the reason is, that slide I showed earlier, these immune cells, they have to run around the body until they find the lymph node, find the infection. They have to recognize it, find the right cell that's going to remove it. And what I'm saying is there's a lot of running around and all these collisions between these little immune cells and bacteria and cancer cells. And so what I'm saying is the faster they can run around and do what they have to do, the better the immune system works. So staying warm helps immune function. One of the things I've noticed too, this is just anecdotal, but I sort of seen a lot of my incredible cancer outcomes were patients who lived in a warm area or stayed kind of warm. So that's totally anecdotal. And I can tell you in my own house, I often like to dress warm, and people in my family will tease me about it, but I go, well, you know what? My brain's working pretty good, isn't it? In addition, what are some other things? Exercise. If you look at your heart is connected to the arteries. It pumps blood into the arteries that goes through the capillaries into the veins, return to the heart. Okay, so that is a closed circuit with a pump of the heart. But you look at the lymphatics, which run parallel to all those vessels. The lymphatics don't have a heart. Okay, so what does that mean? You need to move your muscles, because normally our ancestors walked around a lot more than we do. And by moving those muscles, you contract and you squeeze your lymphatics, and they've got valves in them, and that pushes the lymphatic fluid along its path as it should go. The lymph has got a lot of white blood cells in it, traveling around doing their job, removing infections, removing cancer cells. Okay, they got to remove a lot of cancer cells. A tumor as small as my thumbnail, like about a centimeter in diameter, can release 1 million cancer cells into the blood in a day. So the immune system removes them. Some of them, they just can't find a lodging, they die, but the immune system goes around removing them. So when you're exercising a lot, that helps remove cancer cells. And if you study the people who survived metastatic cancer, look at Ruth Heidrich, for example. She's alive, 40 plus years after having been diagnosed with metastatic cancer. Look at Janet Murray, last name Wakeland. She also ran, she's a lady who ran a marathon every single day of the year all around the periphery of Australia. Okay, that's incredible recovery capacity eating a vegan diet. And she's alive over 20 years after being diagnosed with metastatic cancer. That's a common thing. They exercise a lot. Okay, it improves immune function, keeps those white blood cells moving. Avoid unnecessary stress, because excessive stress, it puts you into fight or flight mode, and that turns off your immune system, like a switch to turn off your immune system. You want your immune system on, all right? So you don't want to avoid caffeine. Caffeine elevates the same hormones as stress, okay? Unless you have to make a long drive and you're tired, it's reasonable in that setting. Other than that, it's a good idea to get rid of caffeine. And try to get your sleep every night. Sleep deprivation also weakens the immune system. You want to be in a PANS, parasympathetic autonomic nervous system phase, because that gives you better immune function. SANS, sympathetic autonomic nervous system, fight or flight, stress, being chased by a tiger in the dark, that turns off your immune system. So you don't want that. Religion helps. Religious people, they're healthier. All the major religions, persons who follow a faith, they are significantly healthier. You can read about that. Positive conversations. If you're around people that are positive, you enjoy talking to each other, that has like a placebo effect, a positive effect. It lowers your stress. It's pleasant. People who are annoying and rude, that's sort of like a negative, a nocebo effect. Okay, positive music is very soothing. It puts me in a good music when I listen to pleasant music, okay? Religious music can be great. Comedy, good comedy and having funny friends, that's a really wonderful thing. But comedy, the laughter, that lowers, that improves immune function. Social support, all that stuff helps. Okay, and it's kind of like this scene here this is from the movie The Seventh Seal by Ingmar Bergman. The knight is playing chess with death. We all play chess with death, trying to play our cards as best we can so we live longer, have a happier life. And here's a normal distribution of people. And basically where you want to be is in the top, 1%. Because I can tell you, most Americans don't age well. Like I got a phone call recently from a neurologist, and she's like, can you take a look at this brain? This patient's kind of confused. He's sort of drifting down cognitively. And she goes, he's sort of like a typical patient. You know what I mean? I go, yeah, fat, sick, and stupid, hypertensive, diabetes, overweight, et cetera. They all have the same problem, okay? Almost all of them. Whenever I see a cognitive impaired patient, I can assume 95% more than them will have those problems, okay? And so it's sad, but that's the reality in Western countries. So what I'm saying is, they will try to scare you away, because I saw something kind of funny. I had to look up something by Dr. McDougall, and I ended up on Dr. McDougall's Wikipedia page. I'm like, okay, well, this could be fun. I'm just going to check it out for something. By the way, Dr. McDougall is a brilliant guy. He's an absolutely brilliant guy, okay? So then I come to their description of him. They go, he seems to be a bit of a vegan extremist, a vegetarian zealot. And I'm like, what kind of nonsense is that? And so what they do is they try to scare, Big Food tries to scare the public away from this low-fat vegan diet because they don't want you to be healthy. And they know that the average person, when they hear, oh, that's extreme, oh, I don't want extreme. You know what? I do. I want to be extremely smart. I want to be extremely fit. I want to age extremely well, okay? Whenever I want to do something good, I want to do my best, okay? So don't be scared of that word. That's how they scare away chumps. I thought that was kind of funny. Because most people are in the pure sad diet, and they do terrible. I just see disasters every day, and it's sad and it's pathetic. And the truth is, in conventional medicine, from chronic disease, none of these patients ever get better. Zero. It's defined as chronic because they never get better. And then the healthcare providers tend to be a little bit better off. They tend to be Mediterranean diet types, but still not that healthy. Okay, they might get an extra 10 years of life. The vegans get a lot more. I'm also going to show you why do I think you should go all out on this, because here's an example of normal variant. I look at a lot of brains, and I often see this variant. So here's what you would call a typical standard normal complete circle of Willis. These are the blood vessels at the base of the brain, internal carotid artery, basilar artery here, and there's a connector between the internal carotids and the basilar. These are called the posterior communicating arteries. Typically, they atrophy as a person gets older, reaches adulthood and maturity. All right, but in some people, you get persistent fetal type, where they're really big. And the significance is then the posterior cerebral artery, this is the posterior cerebral artery, we often call it the PCA, feeds the occipital lobes. When that stays big, what it means is that the supply to the occipital lobes is coming off the carotids, the anterior circulation, not off the basilar, the posterior circulation. And the basilar never fully develops. It's hypoplastic, we call that, for meaning never developed. When you got a small vessel, you're more prone to getting mural atherosclerosis on the wall, blocking one of the penetrating branches. I'll show you what that means in a sec here. Okay, this is showing the basilar artery running on the anterior surface of the pons of the brainstem. So what I'm saying is, when you got a persistent fetal type of circulation, and I see a couple of these every week, you have a hypoplastic basilar along the anterior surface of the brainstem of the pons. A little bit of mural atherosclerosis right here is more prone to plug up one of the perforating branches, pontine perforators, and stroke out the brainstem, stroke out the cerebellum, or just cause a stroke. I'm not going to stroke the whole thing out, but I'll show you in this next slide. So here's what it means. Here's a MRI sequence that shows strokes very well. And all these white spots, these bright spots are strokes. So pop, pop, pop. Look at all these strokes. Pop, 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 pop. Pop, pop, pop. What I'm saying is, you don't know what you got unless you did an MRA of your brain, magnetic resonance arteriogram. You don't know if you have this anatomy. And there's also lots of patients with this that don't stroke out their brainstem or their cerebellum. But the risk of stroking the cerebellum or the brainstem is increased by this. And there's similar anastomotic variations throughout the body, in the heart, in the smaller parts of the brain. So what I'm saying is, you don't know what you got. You might as well assume you got the unfavorable anatomy and optimize your health. It's not rocket science. Why wouldn't you want to do that? Because a typical person thinks, well, at least I'm not as fat as my cousin. I'm doing okay. Well, you know, that's how chumps think. A smart person would say, what's the best I could do? I want to do the best I can do. Okay, and then like I said too, you guys got a pretty good deal. All you got to do is go on the computer and watch a bunch of videos. Go to Chef AJ's site. You're going to see all these videos, lots of free information, and it's good information, and you can really help yourself. So this is a parody of the Statue of Liberty. Bring me your fat, your diabetic, your hypertensive masses, yearning to breathe free, the wretched refuse of your teeming shore, and I will teach them about starch, the god of veganism, who will breathe new life into them. Yeah, you can fix your health for free rather than, you know, most of the time, rather than taking a bunch of pills every day and getting surgerized. Okay, this just shows the sea squirt in its phase when it is a juvenile. It swims around, looks like a tadpole, it has a brain. You know, as soon as you start moving, you have to have a brain because you have to choose a destination, make a value judgment. You have to navigate to it, avoid obstacles, have a memory, be able to return home. In the adult phase, the sea squirt attaches to a rock, becomes a filter feeder. Its brain is totally reabsorbed. You don't need a brain if you just sit, you know, on a couch like a filter feeder. Okay, so keep exercising, it keeps your brain sharp. You activate a pathway called the AMPK way, you know, adenosine monophosphate protein kinase pathway. And when you activate that after exercising, it means you're tired. You have to restore your ATP, your energy stores of the body. It shuts off mTOR. mTOR is a replication pathway, making cells grow. I'll talk more about that in a moment, but that's what you want. Exercise puts you in the energy renewal pathway. Good. Okay. The other thing too is you don't want to work yourself into the ground. I mean, sometimes you really got to work a lot, but don't want to overdo it. This is a Japanese word here, karoshi. Karoshi means death from overwork. A lot of Japanese, they work themselves into the ground. So you don't want that. Do whatever work you got to do, but don't overdo it. If you're too much of a workaholic with no sleep, bad habits, smoking cigarettes, you'll make yourself sick. All right. You want to keep your brain smart. Okay. I'm just showing you one quick picture. This is my magic bathroom, I call it. And that's my secret of how I am able to read so many books. Because people ask me, where do you find the time? Where do you find I work full time as a clinical doctor, and I work pretty long hours. But I got some ideas. Like I heard Mozart would write letters when he's on the loo. And he said, I think it only fitting to write while shitting. I'm like, well, I could read. I put a portable table in there. I'll read a book on there. Usually like a bigger textbook or something for number 2s and a little paperback for number 1s. I got that idea from Monty Python where they did a skit called Every Sperm is Sacred. And I said, well, every void is sacred. I'll read at least one page. So I don't go in that bathroom unless I'm going to I won't, if I step foot in that, I'm going to at least have a page. What a typical person does, they go, well, I better be proactive with my health. I'm going to go to the doctor. And they think the doctor is going to take care of them. Let me tell you, the doctors are very happy to send you for all kinds of tests and make a lot of money off you. You'll have a scope down your mouth and another tube up your butt in 5 seconds, okay? And don't get me wrong, sometimes that might be what you need, but to just randomly walk into all these screening studies, it's a lot more beneficial with a lot fewer side effects to eat the healthy way and learn about this nutrition, diet, and lifestyle stuff, which you have to do every day. You got to feed yourself. Okay, this is just a slide showing abdominal pressure syndrome. I talked about all this stuff in previous lectures, but I'm just letting you know, just eat your dietary fiber so you don't end up with all these problems. You get increased back pressure into the abdomen, a bunch of diseases from lack of dietary fiber. Now, this is an important slide. You might want to hit the print screen button for this one. So this is a normal gut right here. Here's the abnormal gut. This is leaky gut over here, meaning increased intestinal permeability. With a normal gut, you've got a single layer thick of lining cells. The gut's called the enteric tract, so these are enterocytes. Between these cells, you have TJs, which are tight junctions. And the tight junctions are very important. They prevent stuff from getting across. In the bad gut, where you got leaky gut, these tight junctions are disrupted, and now bacteria, the big purple, like purple monster here, and then the LPS, lipopolysaccharide, the bacterial endotoxins, they can get across. And once they get across that barrier layer of epithelium of lining cells and enterocytes, they can cause a lot of trouble, a lot of inflammation. You also get big chunks of protein getting across, and those can mimic our own bodily proteins if they're coming from an animal. That's called molecular mimicry. You can form antibodies to them. Those antibodies can cross-react with your own tissues. So that's called leaky gut leading to molecular mimicry with autoantibody cross-reactivity, and then cross-react with your own body. That's the main cause of autoimmune disease. PAMS just means pathogen-associated molecular pattern, meaning it's the immune system recognizes it as a problem, okay? MAMS is sort of like microbial-associated molecular pattern. So the immune system recognizes. And the immune system, again, does this all by Braille. It feels the outside surface and says, hey, this don't belong in the human body. what you want to have happen under normal circumstances, you eat the dietary fiber that comes with your plant foods. There's no fiber in meat. There's very little in processed food. The good gut bacteria convert this into SCFA. That means short chain fatty acid. The most important one is butyrate. The butyrate is taken up by the enterocytes, and they use it to make the tight junctions. As a matter of fact, some of the butyrate goes into the blood, and it goes up to your brain, and it's used to maintain the tight junctions of your blood-brain barrier, and it protects you. And things that increase leaky gut have a tendency to sometimes increase leakiness in the blood-brain barrier, and vice versa too. Head trauma patients, stroke patients get more increased intestinal permeability, and that's a big deal because if you're leaking a toxin across your gut wall and then you got leaky blood-brain barrier simultaneously, that toxin has an increased chance to get access into your brain. You don't want that. This list right here are all the things that cause leaky gut. And what I'm trying to say here is everybody who's pretty well educated knows that leaky gut's associated with autoimmune disease. They don't teach that to regular doctors. If you talk to some senior resident in internal medicine and go, what causes autoimmune disease? They won't know this. Even the ones doing a fellowship in rheumatology, they won't know this. Most of them won't know this. So what I'm saying is, here's all the things that cause leaky gut. And it's not just autoimmune disease. This LPS gets across the gut lining here. It'll activate these TLR4s, are called toll-like receptor number 4. It also causes, it's like catalytic to cause a tremendous increase in the sort of precipitation, the clotting of your fibrinogen proteins. And I'll show you in another slide what it does, but it changes them from being cylindrical shaped like a slinky, makes them flat like a deck of cards, so they stack up, they precipitate out of solution, they form a refractory form of clots called dense matted deposits. And this ends up being a big deal. I'll explain a little bit more why it's a big deal. So we talked about the autoimmune with the big protein chunks, but the LPS, and it's an endotoxin, so it's eating is prandial. So postprandial means after eating, endotoxemia. Not good. All right, now here's that gut wall. It's your lifeline. You want to protect the darn thing. This is a magnificent painting, Battle of Fort New York. The artist is a magnificent artist, Don Troyan. He's just a fantastic historical artist. Okay, so you want to protect that gut wall. That line is an important line for maintaining health. Exogenous excess fatty acids, LPS, these things activate toll-like receptor 4, and that actually causes increased insulin resistance, all kinds of problems. It also increases your likelihood of becoming depressed. Part of the sickness response that comes from having all this inflammation can make a person want to go off by themselves and not socialize. And that so what I'm saying is the sickness behavior pattern is somewhat similar to depression, and they can overlap. So food and mood are relevant. And that's a long story. I've gone into that a lot in the past. I'm not going to get into it right now, but food has a giant effect on mood. And it's good to know that. Okay, here's a little bit about what happens in your gut. So here's your colon, for example. And you have your gut wall here, and then you have your blood vessels that drain the colon. And if you're getting these bacterial endotoxins in there, LPS is lipopolysaccharide. It comes from gram-negative bacteria. LTA is lipoteichoic acid. It comes from gram-positive bacteria. They're both endotoxins. You can also have excessive amounts of free iron in the blood, which becomes autocatalytic for oxidative stress. The relevance is, here's your fibrinogen, your clotting protein, shaped as it should be, like it's called alpha helix secondary protein structure, and it looks like a slinky, cylindrical. The point is, it'll change from being cylindrical, where it doesn't stick together, to becoming flat, like a deck of cards. They stack up, they precipitate out of solution. Whenever you have a molecule, the bigger a molecule's molecular weight, the more likely it is to precipitate out of solution. And they're very difficult for the body to lyse them, to dissolve them. So they predispose you, they push you towards more clotting. This can also happen from viral infections. And what I'm trying to tell you is most people don't know this. Most doctors don't know about this. Even hematologists don't know this. Infectious disease doctors don't know this. I know this because I talk to them. But I'm telling you, if you want to understand a lot about viral infections, you want to know this. Okay, I'm not going to get into it in much detail now. Here's the two people to study. Douglas Kell and Etheresia Pretorius. He's from England. She's from South Africa. They're both brilliant. They deserve a Nobel Prize. They'll never get it because I don't think they want the public to know about this too much. But they figured out this mechanism of clotting, and it's really a prion-like mechanism. It's called amyloidogenic clotting. It's an amyloid transformation to go from being alpha helix secondary protein structure to being beta pleated sheet, flat protein structure, and it causes these clotting. So a normal clot has fibrinogen strands, thrombin strands. They look like spaghetti. The clot looks like spaghetti strands that sort of wrap up the red blood cells versus dense matter deposits. They're all these bulky clusters that are very hard to dissolve. Here's a little bit better picture of it. So here's the spaghetti-like normal clot, and here's the dense matted deposit. It's like having chewing gum in your hair, okay? It's not good. They also distort the shape of red blood cells. Remember, excessive free iron does that as well as LPS and LTA. And what I'm trying to tell you, viruses will do this too, and it can be a very big deal. And here's their example proving it happens with LPS, with LTA, and with iron. And then they believe this is a major contributor to dementia. So the theory is that these small clots that are difficult to dissolve are going around plugging up small blood vessels in the brain, the heart, and other places, and causing a gradual decrease in function. And so how do you prevent it? Avoid leaky gut. Okay, that's what you want to do. So you don't get the LPS and the LTA in there. Avoid iron fortified foods, which is most processed foods. Well, not most of them, but lots of processed foods. And avoid things like red meat, which are high in that too. And kind of like what it comes down to is, imagine you bought a fancy car. Here's like a Rolls Royce car. And the owner's manual says, well, put premium gas in there. So anybody with a brain in their head is going to put premium gas in there. You wouldn't put regular gas in there, crap gas in your, expensive car. Well, your body is like a car. A car, if you take good care of it, you might get 20 years out of it or so. Your body, you want it to last, 90 or more years. So you want to put the premium fuel, whatever's the best fuel for your car in there. And that will keep you healthy. The best fuel for humans, low fat, low sodium, 100% vegan diet, okay, with no oils, no alcohol, okay, no caffeine. That's what works, take it or leave it, And I said too, it's like a Super Mario Brothers, any video game, in any video game, you're going through an obstacle course, you do the good stuff, you get energy points, you screw up, you do something bad, wrong, you lose energy points. And that's what health is like. There's lots of things. So you want to learn about health to know what things help you, what things hurt you, and then do the good stuff, avoid the bad stuff. So here's the basic types of fat. Sat fat has no double bonds. MUFA is a monounsaturated fatty acid. Classic one is olive oil, but olive oil itself's got about 12 to 14% sat fat in it, and it's also got a bunch of omega-6 in it too. But in general, it's a largely MUFA. Okay. PUFA is polyunsaturated fatty acids. The two main ones are the omega-6s and the omega-3s. Omega is based on, this is called the omega-N. And if you count the number of carbons so you get a double bond, this would be an omega-6 fat because the double bond's at the 6th position. If it were at the 3 position, that would be an omega-3 fat. Okay. This carbon, there's usually a skip carbon in between the double bonds, and that skip carbon has a hydrogen on it. And these double bonds are pulling on the electrons relative to that hydrogen. So this hydrogen is very vulnerable to being plucked off. I'll show you a picture of that in a moment, but that's really important and relevant. The more double bonds there are, the more methylene bridge carbons there are like that are very vulnerable to having their hydrogen stolen away from them. This guy right here is pretty famous ophthalmologist, Dr. Knob, and he's talking about, he went through the epidemiology of a bunch of countries on dietary patterns, and what he found was the biggest correlate to obesity and a lot of chronic Western diseases was, in his opinion, these vegetable oils, the omega-6 fats. So, I do think he's a little bit of a meat promoter. So they want to push, the meat promoters want to push the blame away from sat fat to the cooking oils, okay? And somebody that's trying to sell oils wants to push the blame to the sat fat, okay? I think they're both bad. But it was pretty interesting that he showed the omega-6 cooking oils are much worse than people thought they are. And I think he's actually correct about that. But I also think sat fat's bad. Okay, here's a PUFA, polyunsaturated fatty acid. Here's a methylene bridge carbon, and the hydrogen gets plucked off. And then you can form 2 oxygens binding to that site. It's called a peroxide with 2 oxygens next to each other. And this can initiate a series of chain reactions like domino effect and just damage membranes and can damage DNA, can cause all kinds of tissue damage. It's bad. That's another reason why I don't believe in supplementing with omega-3s, because they got lots of double bonds on them and they're at risk to undergo these lipid peroxidation reactions. Okay, everybody talks about omega-6s doing it, but I don't see any reason why the omega-3s weren't. The omega-3s cause immune suppression, increase your risk of prostate cancer, obesity, insulin resistance, diabetes, make you fat. I don't see a benefit in that. Okay, omega-6, tons of problems for those. Sat fat, tons of problems for those. Elevated cholesterol. They put a lot of flavorants in the food, make it taste good, all these processed foods. So people tend to, can even become addicted to them and they'll overeat them. Okay, and they make the mouth feel just right. They do a lot of research. They're smart. Okay, now here's kind of a cool slide. I don't know if you're seeing this toolbar down your screen. I want to hide it here because this is a good slide for you to, you might want to push your print screen button on this one. because I sort of listed all of the common toxins in processed food, especially toxins in your water here. I highlighted those in blue. These sweeteners, artificial sweeteners are toxic. A lot of common medications are what I would consider toxins as well. So animal protein, the way you match it up is it an obesogen? Does it make the person fat? Is it a diabetogen? Does it increase diabetes risk? Does it increase hypertension risk? Is it a dementigen? Is it associated with cognitive impairment? Prothrombotic, does it predispose your blood to clotting? Leaky gut, does it increase intestinal permeability? Infertility, does it increase your risk of that? Immune suppression, atherosclerosis, cancer. And what you're going to see is this stuff is really common. So meat's basically, bad for health. Unless I was starving, I wouldn't eat meat again. Okay, sat fat. A lot of problems with sat fat, especially immediately comes to mind is diabetes, excess iron, then you get oxidative stress, all kinds of tissue damage. It's autocatalytic tissue damage when the levels get real high. Okay, flavorants here make you eat too much. Plus, this has a direct excitotoxin effect here, the glutamate. Okay, we talked a lot about the problems with sodium. Soy is goitrogenic. It's also associated with infertility. I would avoid it. And most of the stuff eaten in this country is real processed and like with hexane, neurotoxin, etc. Fish is a total joke. I would never eat fish. There's a lady by the name of Jane Hightower. She wrote a book about all the problems with all these yuppies who were trying to be healthy. They started eating a bunch of fish, and a lot of them got cognitive impairment. And she's the one who figured out how to test for it correctly, took them off the fish, and lots of them really improved dramatically. Alcohol, ETOH, is just a brain toxin. I recommend zero alcohol, none at all. Atrazine is a common herbicide sprayed on corn, which is subsidized. So corn and soy are subsidized. This is the source for cheap protein. To make cheap protein out of that, like isolated soy protein, it increases insulin-like growth factor, which I wouldn't want to do. That can increase your activation of mTOR. I would worry about that increasing cancer growth. I don't have the paper in front of me, so I'm not going to claim I do, but it's not something I would want to do is increase my insulin-like growth factor. Okay, atrazine, it's a mitochondrial inhibitor. It's an estrogenic. I would never eat that stuff. Fungal inhibitors, there's tons of them. They put fungal inhibitors, tons of them in processed food because they don't want mold growing in the food. And because of the fungal inhibitors, they don't want mold growing in the food. It turns out they're also mitochondrial inhibitors. They also put food dyes in there, which are often mitochondrial inhibitors. We just talked about it earlier. A major thing in optimizing brain function and immune system function is having healthy mitochondria. Avoid all this stuff. Omega-6 end up leading to hydroxynonenal toxic aldehydes that are mitochondria inhibitors. Okay, omega-3 fats, immunosuppressants, increase obesity, increase diabetes. I have no interest in that stuff. Okay, they're going to be atherogenic as well. Blankenhorn did studies showing that whatever fat you eat, it increases your atherosclerosis risk. Okay, they're putting more and more of these chemicals on some of the food. I try to avoid these things as best I can. I mean, in a perfect world, you would, grow your own food. In the next best world, the farmer who grows it for you organically. In the next best world, you buy, organic in a store if you can afford it. Starches are relatively cheap. They store well. I love fruit, but fruit tends to be expensive, doesn't store so well, and it's often seasonal. These estrogenic chemicals are much worse than people realize. There was a paper coming out. I think the author might be Seralini, but he pointed out that he doesn't even think they should be called EDCs, endocrine disrupting chemicals. He thinks they should be called ENDCs, endocrine and neurologic disrupting chemicals. Plus, they do a bunch of other things. They're also sometimes have a tendency towards being prothrombotic. Okay, being obesogens. Estrogen is a fat storage hormone. The pregnant lady, you want her body to store more weight. The baby might need that for energy later. So it's not what you want. Okay, caffeine. I talked about caffeine already. These emulsifiers in processed food, carrageenan and polysorbate. BT corn is designed like a pesticide to make the insect's belly burst when it eats the corn. Well, guess what? It can also irritate your own gut lining. Okay, this stuff, AL right here, it's put in your municipal tap water. So anyways, I show you this stuff so you realize that this is sometimes been called death by 1,000 cuts. You're being nickeled and dimed and injured in a whole bunch of minor ways such that you can't even notice them. And you can't get out of the line of fire unless you know where it's coming from. And that's what I'm telling you. It's right here. It's right here. It's in the processed food. It's in your air if they're doing the trails of chem. You know what I'm talking about. So you avoid these things as best you can. And by knowing what they are, you now know what to avoid. And the more of them you avoid, the better chance you have to optimize your health. So yeah, you just hit the print screen button. You can save a copy of that slide and review it more on your own. Here's a bunch of things that cause insulin resistance. Okay. I gotta move this thing here. I don't know how to clear this. I keep being stuck with this mouse cursor. If I, well, anyways, all right. So saturated fat's the main thing that causes insulin resistance, and the other fats as well, but excess dietary sodium, these are a whole bunch of things that'll cause insulin resistance. So if you're worried about diabetes, that's more stuff to avoid. And I'm going to talk a little more about mitochondrial toxins in a moment and SERCA inhibitors. Okay. It's not letting me. Okay, there we go. Let me make sure I didn't lose the slide. Okay. So here, what I'm saying is, when you first hear all this stuff, you can be discouraged. You can say, you can feel like Don Quixote, you know, oh, this is impossible. And then Don Quixote's idea of tilting in a windmill was, in my opinion, that's people who say, well, we need to, you know, contact these corporations and tell them to stop doing that. We need to contact the regulatory agency and tell them to stop doing that. My advice would be, that's like tilting in a windmill. That's stupid. They've got $1 billion, all these companies and these organizational institutions. They're never going to change. They are profiting off the current system. They have zero inclination to change. So you're just, I think, going to waste your time. The smart move is to try to understand it. And one of the ways of understanding is, I'll just give you a metaphor to this Greek myth, Antaeus. So this guy Antaeus was a wrestler, and he could beat everybody as long as he could keep one foot on the ground. He was anchored to the earth. Mother Nature is where his strength came from. And, you know, during the labors of Hercules, one of the things he had to do was to conquer Antaeus, and he couldn't beat Antaeus. It was, you know, like a tie. They were going back and forth. And then what he figured out, Hercules, was if he could lift him off the ground so that he didn't have his foot in contact with the earth where his strength came from, he could then, you know, sort of crush him with a bear hug. And what I'm trying to tell you is, your strength comes from doing what you're made to do. Live like your ancestors did thousands of years ago, eating plant foods, walking around a lot, getting sunshine, spending time with your family, your extended family. That's what humans are designed to do. That's what makes you happy and healthy. A lot of this modern stuff is just a confusion, a trick. It's not what you really need to be healthy. Okay, and again, I would make the metaphor. You want to live, you know, pretty much like Adam and Eve, but keep your modern indoor heating and plumbing. It's nice to be warm and have that. You know, the Bible in Genesis 1:29 says, behold, I've given you every plant yielding seed, which is upon all the face of the earth, and every tree which has fruit, it shall be food for you. And some people say, well, what about eating meat later on? Well, after the flood with Noah came back, you know, all the plants were kind of wiped out after the flood, so they had to eat animal foods after that. And then I'm not going to get into all that Bible stuff. I don't got time to get into that now. Here's the Psalm 23. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I shall fear no evil, because the vegan diet is at my side. Okay. Yeah, I got my mouse back. Okay, good. I don't even know how I did it. All right, just showing you one thing about mTOR. mTOR is like it means mammalian target of rapamycin. Rapamycin comes from the island of Rapa Nui. So one with like the Easter Island statues. Okay, and the gist of it being that it's an inhibitor. Rapa Nui inhibits mTOR. mTOR, mammalian target of rapamycin, sometimes called mechanistic target of rapamycin. It's a nutrient sensing pathway that when nutrient levels are high, it tells the cell to grow, to replicate, to divide. And things that tend to be the rate limiting steps, most often is like leucine, that's a branched chain amino acid, much more common in meat. Methionine, more common in meat. Okay, this is one of the reasons why meat has a little bit of an anabolic effect. It'll activate mTOR. High amounts of dietary fat, insulin resistance, hyperinsulinemia, they cause increased activation of mTOR, telling the cell to replicate. Well, you know what? If you replicate your cells too fast, you accelerate the point where they reach the point of no return called the Hayflick limit. So you accelerate aging. If you replicate your cells fast, you speed up cancer growth. You don't want that. You don't want inappropriate, unnecessary activation of mTOR. Okay. And here's another slide. This is from that article just showing that you also will cause accelerated aging in adults. And you're reaching a Hayflick limit. Normally when a cell replicates, the DNA polymerase can't get to the end of the chromosome. So you get a little shortening of the chromosome with each cell replication. Eventually, you keep shortening the chromosome to the point where it starts shortening into genes that the cell needs to function. That's called reaching the Hayflick limit. Leonard Hayflick, he was a molecular biologist, microbiologist, working with human tissue cultures, and he found that a somatic cell, meaning any cell in the body other than your stem cells, your germ cells, your gonads and stuff, they can only divide about 60 times. And once they've reached their 60 divisions, the cell would just die. So you don't want to speed that up. It's like turning an hourglass over, okay? You don't want to speed it up. You don't want to tap on it or something, speed it up. Okay, what can you do to slow down mTOR? Well, avoid giving it what it needs. It needs all the fat, so eat low fat. It needs all the protein, especially animal protein. Give it less protein. Okay, exercise more so you activate AMPK pathway, and which shuts off mTOR. Okay, those are things that you could do. Hyperinsulinemia with the high-fat diets actually cause a bit of a sympathetic response, which is sort of like the fight or flight stuff, and that's going to have it's going to contribute to more high blood pressure. It's going to contribute to more immune suppression. You don't want it. It's not good. Okay, and this is what I meant by people are being exposed to tons of things. They're not getting the good things in plants. That's weakening them. They're sleep deprived. They're stressed out. They're taking meds with lots of side effects. All of these things are adding up to diminish their health. So what you do is you learn about the individual things and you avoid them. Avoid the alcohol. Never use MJ, okay? Here's a little trick I'm going to tell you. Sometimes I'll have to do a ton of work. Sometimes I'm going to lift weights. I want my personal best. Sometimes I'm giving a lecture and I want more energy. Here's what I do. I will drink a 32-ounce bottle of beet juice. It doesn't have to be this brand. It can be any brand of beet juice. And I'll chase it down with water. I usually do reverse osmosis water. It doesn't have to be this bottled water or anything. But the point of it is, number one, it hydrates you. Number two, it increases your blood sugar transiently. Number three, there's a lot of nitrate precursors in beet juice. So all these things, it works, it energizes you. And what's the benefit? I call it a caffeine substitute because it's a pick-me-up in a sense of increasing your energy level, but you don't get the caffeine insomnia effect at night. So I like doing this. I've done this hundreds and hundreds of times, and I know it works. I can squat more. I can find the words more quickly when I'm speaking. I got more energy when I have to work. Sometimes I got to do tons of work, like 2 shifts in one day, and it just energizes me. Why did Beethoven have so much energy? Because he has a beat in his name. Okay, so we talked about all this stuff here. So you get the energy benefit without the problems. I just mentioned this one guy, Kipchoge, because people sometimes ask me, what about endurance athletes? Kipchoge is a guy who set the world record for a marathon in less than 2 hours. He drinks lots of iced tea with sugar in it. So I wouldn't do that because I don't like iced tea because I think, you got caffeine and you also got, there's some aluminum that it might accumulate and stuff. So I don't drink it, but I'm just letting you know for a marathon runner, that's what people sometimes talk about for a workout meal. But marathon's kind of a crazy thing. 26 miles, minimum 2 hours of running for quick energy boost that lasts about 6 hours. I'll guzzle it down about 1.5 hours to 2 hours before performance time, so to speak. And then it lasts me about 6 hours typically that my energy is increased. Works for me. Okay, here's just one paper showing it. They took a bunch of bicyclists and put them on a stationary bike and did time trials on them. And they had better exercise performance in that way. Okay, now here's one thing too I was getting at. Some people think, oh, well, this regulatory agency or this other regulatory agency, they're going to make sure the food or the water or some other environmental variable is safe. And what I'm saying is don't kid yourself. These are all the regulatory bodies that approved having F- in your water, okay? They're not going to protect you, okay? And it's going to remind me of one time my kid came to me, I think he's like in junior high, and he's pissed off because I think his teacher gave him an unfair grade. And I kind of talked about it. It was a minor assignment paper. It didn't really matter. So I told him to just let it go. But, he was pretty upset about it. And I told him a story about the rabbit in the forest. Here comes Peter Cottontail hopping down the bunny trail. But no, here's a rabbit. He's in the forest. Okay. He looks out this way and he sees a fox, coming towards him. He looks up in a tree and he sees a hawk coming towards him or looking at him, getting ready to maybe pounce on him. He looks over in this direction. He sees a big old snake, a big rattlesnake, okay, with its V-back all stuck out. And he's like, uh-oh. And what I'm saying is, do you think the rabbit's going to get anywhere if he tells Mr. Fox, please don't eat me, Mr. Hawk, please don't, pounce on me? No, they're going to do what they're going to do. And that's just the way life is. So he needs a system of burrows to find his way around the forest and to be safe. He needs to pay attention to the birds. They're like the alarm system of the forest, okay? He needs to have, a way of surviving, okay? And that's kind of what you have to do. You have to adapt yourself to the world. Good luck changing the world. If you got $1 billion, you might be able to change a few things. A regular person, we can't change the world. All we can do is change ourselves. So you need to understand that, because in my experience, lots of people, they think someone's going to come and save them. They think the doctor is going to save them, or they think the system is going to save them. No, sad but true is that the system doesn't care about you. Your doctor probably doesn't know anything about nutrition, epidemiology, toxicology, so they really can't help you with these chronic problems. So you need to know this stuff, okay? Typical person, you are here. Here's the map. The typical chump, what 99+% of people do, they keep on eating stupid, being stressed out, drinking caffeine, all these other health bad habits. They end up on a bunch of pills, and the pills don't work. Then they get surgerized, chop, chop, chop. They lose tons of money, bye money, sometimes go bankrupt from this, and they die prematurely. That's what most people do. I call this man's way, expecting other people to save you. Oh, your doctor's going to save you. The system's going to save you. Good luck. Okay. And here is, you are here. You learn how to eat, how to avoid toxins, how to minimize EMF, and you'll keep the Johnson working a lot longer. You'll avoid pills and surgery dramatically so. These are the other things that make you healthy. You know, there's been healthy people on this planet since thousands and thousands of years. It doesn't have to cost money. I'll sometimes call this God's way of healing. Okay. It's free because you got to pay for food anyways. And it usually works. Okay. And you probably live on average about 90 years of age. Okay. Even if you do everything right, that seems to be about how far you go before the system stops working. Okay, here's a lovely set of paintings by Thomas Cole, one of the greatest story painters ever in the history of the world. It's called The Voyage of Life series. So the young man, he's real high testosterone, real enthusiastic. I'm going to go seek my destiny. Mama guardian angel says, good luck. And he's looking up at his utopia in the sky, his idealized future. And that's what he's hoping and expecting. In reality, though, you can see that as the river winds around the bend here, it starts picking up speed going into a rapids. Okay. And here's middle age for a lot of us. Okay. Things ain't working as well as they used to. Okay. We're up late at night, you know, with the baby, with the wife, with the job, whatever it is. We're working our butt off. We're kind of tired and exhausted. We maybe get sick all of a sudden. We get fat. We get a disease. Life starts throwing us some curveballs. Mama's far away. We're on our own. And it's kind of scary. This happens to a lot of us. All of a sudden, you're fat or you're sick, or you got some other health problem, okay? And it reminds me of Dante from the Divine Comedy, where he said, in middle age, I found myself in a dark wood, and the path was lost. Okay, you're sick, what are you going to do? So your typical thing is go to a doctor. By the way, I had the same problem. In my early 30s, I was working too much. I was like doing 2 fellowships at the same time. I wrote a textbook here of imaging-guided surgery, and I also had a baby at home with the wife. I wasn't sleeping well. So I got all fat and I couldn't believe it. And I couldn't lose the weight for 3 years on my own. And I'm like, uh-oh, I better start taking this seriously. You know, exercise more and eat less does not work. Okay. And, you know, the medical system, what's it good for? It's actually great for acute problems and some chronic like end stage things. Like if your kidneys fail, they can put you on dialysis. They can transplant you a kidney, stuff like that. Okay. But what is chronic medicine for chronic disease? Okay, that's a different situation. This is Dante, and he's with Virgil at the gates of hell, and it says on the above the gates of hell, it says, "Abandon hope, all ye who enter." And conventional medicine is like that for chronic disease. It never cures the patient. It calls the disease chronic because it never cures them. And I joke about conventional medicine. It's like a bunch of cheerleaders saying, "We're the best. We're the best. We never win." The cure rate for hypertension, diabetes, with pills, it's 0. You take those pills the rest of your life. Okay. And then that's what leads to atherosclerosis, coronary artery disease, strokes, and all this stuff. So imagine a sports team that lost every single game and bragged that said, "We're the best. We never win." It's stupid. Okay. You know, all the conventional medicine books say the same thing. You know, this disease is associated with aging. It's partly genetic. Maybe it's due to a virus in some situations. You know, stupid. Okay, typical poor patient. You know, they're all fat. This guy says to himself, "Oh, I've got a beer belly," whereas he looks like a pregnant female. He's got a big belly. He's got moobs, man boobs. All right, and how good is conventional medicine for these chronic common diseases? Less than 0, because it puts you on a pill that doesn't work, makes you think you're being treated, but you're not. Meanwhile, in the background, you're getting progression of chronic problems, so they become irreversible. You calcify all your arteries and your hypertension is never going to go away. You destroy your pancreas, then your diabetes is never going to go away. Whereas if you had gone low-fat vegan in the beginning, you would have had a very good chance to reverse it completely and cure it and not need to take any pills. Instead, you get stuck taking a pill every day for all these conditions. You're like a chump, like a cow, milked by the system. You don't want that if you can prevent it. Okay, and what I'm saying is it reminds me of the lamppost metaphor, or this is also called a logical fallacy. The lamppost metaphor means that, like, imagine this guy was a drunk and he lost his keys, so he's trying to find his keys. And so he's looking under the lamppost, and then somebody walks by and they say, "Hey, where'd you lose your keys? You lose them right here?" And he says, "No, I lost them over there." They go, "Well, why don't you look over there?" And he goes, "Well, there's no light over there." And what I'm saying is, in order to make money, a scientific researcher needs a grant. In order to get a grant, he needs to get somebody with a lot of money to give him money. And most of the time, the money donors are trying to sell a drug or to sell a device. So they're always going to focus on these things. When somebody tells you a problem is caused by aging, genetics, or viruses, what they're saying is there's nothing you could do about it. You must take our pill, our drug, our surgery, versus all this stuff here that empowers the patient. It never gets talked about. You could read stacks of medical journals and not find anything except this type of talk. Okay. In all the medical textbooks, I've gone through them all. I think they're all a joke. All the internal medicine textbooks and all the internal medicine subspecialties, they're full of nonsense. Okay, literally stupid. You can say, people say, how could you say that? It's obvious. Okay, if you look at the rate of hypertension in the United States, it's off the charts. If you look at Kenya, let's say Kenya, 1929, the Lancet Journal, article by Donison, there were in 1,800 consecutive admissions, no hypertensive patients. Okay, in the United States, blacks hypertension off the charts. Okay, and the same thing too. You go to these populations where they eat plant-based diets endemically, probably like 95% plant-based diet, and they don't have atherosclerosis, they don't have coronary artery disease, they don't have hypertension, they don't have type 2 diabetes. Okay, and by the way, atherosclerosis can be partially reversed. You can reabsorb the lipid core, you can reabsorb the necrotic core, you can reabsorb the initial blood clot component of it. You're unlikely to absorb the calcification. Some people are now saying on the internet you can absorb the calcifications. That's going to take a heck of a long time. Okay, but you potentially could, I guess, but that's not really the issue. The issue is get improvement as fast as you can and prevent a myocardial infarction, atrial fibrillation, or a stroke. Okay, so the key point about atherosclerosis is it's a blood clot. I got longer lectures on Chef AJ where I go through all kinds of detail about it, but just know it's a blood clot. So you want to avoid things that cause clotting. Endothelial precursor cells come and cover up the clot, and that puts it subendothelial. Okay, that's the solution to that mystery. And basically, you want to do things, I call this maintenance in life things. Exercise opens up the AMPK pathway instead of mTOR. That's good. The energy renewal pathway, good. Sunshine increases your vitamin D, which increases your immune system function. It helps also, not only prevents bad things, infection and cancer, but it also helps prevent autoimmune disease. It does everything you want. It's much better to get your vitamin D that way than taking a pill for it. All these things here, we just talked about them before. Those keep you healthy. All this stuff over here, the high fat, high meat, high sodium, processed foods, estrogenic chemical exposure, all that stuff that comes from all the processed food and modern life things, they all make you sicker. Okay, and here's how conventional medicine looks at all these diseases. It sees them all as separate, distinct diseases, and each one gets its different pill for it. So example, here's these pills, 1 through disease 1, pill 1, disease 10, pill number 10. So conventional medicine is based on the idea all these diseases are different. You have to match the yield of the pill and send a bill. And it's a great way for selling drugs. Okay, but the patient's never cured. You just keep accumulating more and more pills. In conventional medicine, it doesn't want to cure the patient, because if you cure a patient, let's say a diabetes or hypertension, you lose them. They don't take your pill anymore. They don't need to come back for checkups. They don't need to come back for labs. Cure a patient and you lose a customer. There's no incentive to cure the patient. Okay, and so the way you learn your way out of a problem is you read everything about it from all the different perspectives. This is the 5 blind men and the elephant. You know, each one, the guy touching the tail thinks it's a rope. The one touching the side thinks it's a wall. The one touching the ear thinks it's a rug. And what I'm saying is what you want is to come up above and have a bird's eye view. And so here's a nice painting by Caspar David Friedrich called Wanderer Above the Sea Fog. You're looking down. That's what you want. That bird's eye view where you can see the entire problem and you can then make an objective decision about it. This is a characteristic pattern of romanticism type paintings to show the individual as being relatively small in big, powerful nature, and his coping with that as part of that kind of beautiful painting. All right. So what I'm saying is if you do it from a nutrition-based perspective, you say, gee, all of these problems are abdominal pressure syndrome or lack of dietary fiber. So if I just eat my dietary fiber and avoid the things that cause leaky gut, I can avoid all this stuff. Okay. Solution without a pill. All right. And then you look at hypertension, diabetes. Well, they're due to high fat diets and a little bit also due to these other things. I'll just avoid the bad stuff. I'll do the good stuff. I'll eat my plant foods, get my potassium, magnesium vasodilators, and my nitrite precursors and nitric oxide vasodilators, and I'll probably avoid all these problems. Okay. I call this God's way of healing versus man's way. It's cheap. It works. Doesn't cost you any money. Anybody could do it. Why wouldn't you want that? A little more complex for cancer. There's some mutagens that are relevant. A little more complex for dementia. There's excitotoxins, circuitoxins, etc. EMF, TBI. So that's more complicated. I've talked about that previously. We'll briefly allude to it, but we're not getting into much detail on that today. And here's the chart of the diets. Typical American eats Standard American diet, high fat, high meat diet, high oils. They get all these diseases here. East Asians like Japan, Korea, China, all these to eat a lot of the white rice diets. And that was actually good because that's only about 1% of its calories from fat. The thing that would get them in trouble, like the Japanese, are eating tons of sodium, and that will cause hypertension. They're also smoking like chimneys. That'll cause hypertension as well, elevate hematocrits. So they would have some problems from that. Okay. But they were actually better off than the Americans because of the low fat nature of their diets. South Asians, like people from India and people eating an Indian diet, even though it's largely vegetarian, a lot of them, they're relatively skinny. The problem is they got a lot of diabetes, and I think it's because they eat too much fried food. They get the omega-6 cooking oils, they fry them, they get all this lipid peroxidation, and then you get into the Tetsumori Yamashita theory of omega-6 cooking oils leading to lipid peroxidation, toxic aldehydes, hydroxynonenal, and then he further describes it as something called the Calpain-Cathepsin theory. The bottom line is omega-6 oils destroy your tissue. Okay, they're bad for the pancreas, they're bad for your brain, they're bad for your memory center, the hippocampus, they're bad for your hunger center, the arcuate nucleus of the hypothalamus. Bad, bad, bad. You don't want any of them. I will never eat anything with a drop of oil in it. Okay, low fat, low sodium vegan. Gee, you minimize your risk of all this stuff. Why wouldn't you want to do that? It's the best option there is. By the way, I'm not an animal rights person. I wish animals well. Everybody should be nice to animals, and I think it's nice. But what I'm trying to say is this is entirely based on health. Okay. If I thought that it would make me 18 years old again, I would eat a steak, but it doesn't. So I don't. So I'm just letting you know, this is entirely based on that. Okay. This is a starch-based diet here. So what's the point of starch-based diet? When you eat starch, starch is a plant food. It's a polymer of glucose. Typical examples would be potatoes, sweet potatoes, rice, beans, peas, quinoa, oatmeal. So it's a plant food that is a polymer of glucose, meaning a bunch of glucose molecules all stuck together, kind of like what glycogen is in a human, is storing a bunch of glucose molecules all together into a big polymer. Polymer just means polymer, multiple components of the same thing. You got the glucose that's surrounded by fiber. So what happens is it goes into your stomach and it's low caloric density. There's Chef AJ word, low caloric density. That stretches your stomach. And when it stretches your stomach, you get early satisfaction of hunger. It goes into your small intestine. Now your intestinal enzymes, they got to peel that fiber off of the glucose before the glucose is absorbed from your gut to your blood. And this takes a lot of time. So you get early satisfaction of hunger from the low caloric density, and then you get a prolonged satisfaction of hunger from the slow digestive absorption process of separating the fiber from the glucose. So your glucose comes up kind of gradually and stays normal a prolonged amount of time. You're in the zone, a healthy blood glucose level, and you satisfy your hunger with the fewest number of calories. That makes you skinny, okay? If you have a bunch of simple sugars, you can spike your blood glucose fast, comes down rapidly. That's called rebound hypoglycemia. You don't want that because that'll lead to a roller coaster effect, okay? Okay, so that's why starch is a great food. And the majority of your calories should come from starch. There are some people doing really well eating fruits. That's a separate topic. Fruits and fruitarian type diets, that's a more complex topic we're not going to get into. And for most people, it's not practical. They don't have enough access to fruits. They don't have enough money for them. They don't have storage option, etc. Okay, real quick on the patterns of atherosclerosis. This is a typical Western or atherosclerosis. Number one spot they get problems is the coronary arteries of the heart. They also get a lot of carotid atherosclerosis. They also get a lot of atherosclerosis in Johnson. In the Western world, tons of men are impotent at a relatively young age, okay? I can remember I had friends asking me for Viagra in their 30s and early 40s. I'm like, holy crap, that's not good. The Japanese sort of problem, the Asian atherosclerosis pattern was to get it intracranial, and that's associated with hypertension from the real high sodium diets and the real smoking all the cigarettes, okay? Some people have both. Whereas in comparison, you look at the northern Mexico, Tarahumara, living in Sierra Madre Mountains, Copper Canyon area, for example, they used to be combined with the Pima. After the Mexican-American War, the Pima were absorbed into Arizona. They eat the standard American diet. There are tons and tons of people, fat, sick, diabetic, hypertension. Tarahumara is still pretty good health, and they can run 100 miles in 2 days. So here's the Tarahumara running ultra marathons. Here's the Pima, fat and sick, getting all the characteristic surgical scars of Westerner, eating a sad diet. Here's the Yanomamo in the Amazon jungle, eating plant diets. They don't get any high blood pressure, okay? And it goes on and on. It's always the same story. The people eating the plant foods, they're relatively skinny, without hypertension or coronary artery disease. Same thing with Kenya. I told you about the lack of hypertension there in 1929 when it was tested out. Okay. In Finland, they did something like the reverse process. They had a lot of people fat and sick with a lot of heart disease dying at a young age. And they did what was called the Karelia Project. This guy, Pekka Puska, was a doctor who kind of led the project. And by optimizing their diet and quitting smoking and minimizing their dietary sodium, they had an 84% drop in cardiovascular mortality. It's a giant drop, okay? It's a pretty famous thing. Okay, and you just see it. It's always the same, okay? It almost gets boring because it's always the same thing. The Japanese, when they go from eating their old traditional plant-based diet, there's Okinawa where they ate a lot of sweet potatoes for a while. They move to Hawaii, they sort of get partially Americanized, westernized in their diet. Their health gets worse. They go to California, they get more and more westernized. Their health gets worse and worse. And they eat more and more fat and they get sicker. Loma Linda, you know, the Seventh-day Adventists, the 100% vegans were the healthiest of them compared to the other subsets of Seventh-day Adventist persons. And they had incredible long life. They had like the longest large-scale recorded study of a population. The vegans on average, the women were living about 88.6 years and the men about 85.3 years. And that's the longest well-documented lifespan I've ever heard of. Okinawa was close, but it was still a little better than Okinawa from what I had read. Okay, here's just showing, this is called filial piety of the family and the paralytic man here. And so the family's all helping them out, keeping them alive. So it makes a big difference having family support. So try to get along with your family and friends and coworkers as best you can. Social support is a big deal. There was something called the Rosetto effect. That was Italian families in Rosetto, Pennsylvania, where they used to all live together, you know, mama, papa, grandpa, the kids, the nephews, the cousins and stuff. And so what would happen is, you know, if Guido loses his job, he can live with his mom, he can live with his cousin for a couple months till he finds a new job, versus a guy on your own in the city, you lose your job, you're screwed, okay? So they had demographically matched populations, same amount of cigarette smoking, same amount of drinking. And the Rosetto, you know, Italian families were much healthier. And then America became more and more spread out. People moved farther and farther away from their town of birth, and they lost that benefit. So the Rosetto effect lowers stress, brings happiness, makes you healthier. So getting along with other people makes a person healthier. So it's good to have. They talk too about the blue zones. The centenarians, people who made it to 100, they all tended to have relatively good sense of humor, relatively good sort of personalities that were easygoing, would make the most of a situation. So, you know, make lemonade out of lemons, if you will, because we all get screwed on some things, or we're sad about some things, have our disappointments and frustrations, but you'll learn to kind of roll with it, okay, see a bigger picture. I like the Marcus Aurelius quote, "A man should be like a rocky cliff, and though the waves will break against him all day long, the cliff stands firm." So basically, you don't get bothered by little stuff. A good example is that, like, I hung out with this one emergency room doctor when I was a medical student. I was called shadowing. And I noticed that he didn't get flustered by any of the chaos, difficult situations he encountered. And then he was able to go to the next room. I go, how do you do that? How do you not get emotionally upset or anything when you have all these complex, you know, sad situations? And he's like, if I got emotional about this patient in this room, I wouldn't be mentally ready to go see the patient in the next room. And so anyways, what I'm trying to say is, when you think that way, it just helps. It's a stoic philosophy, but it helps. I do it myself. I always like, they could always hurt me more, in the sense that there could always be more work piled on me. Whatever it is, I will do it. Whatever it is, I will do it. And I just crank through all the work. And that's a good way to be. Okay, I love this painting. I think it's the most beautiful landscape painting ever made. This guy, Albert Bierstadt, he was awesome landscape painter from the mid-1800s. He has a whole bunch of magnificent paintings that are all almost as good as this. He's a magnificent landscape artist. So anyways, why am I showing you this? Because there's something called biophilia. To see a beautiful scene from nature, it makes us happy. We just like it. So if you have some ability in a convenient, positive way to encounter nature, that'll often make you happy, or whatever it'll be for each individual. It could be growing a garden. Okay. And, you know, I love Ayn Rand's quote, art is a concretization of metaphysics, where you state, this is important, this is good, that's why I'm painting it. So what the painting reflects back to you, it's highly relevant, morally, philosophically, and this is magnificent. Okay. The best source of happiness comes from who a man is. This is a quote from Arthur Schopenhauer. He says, a happy life is impossible. The highest a man can achieve is a heroic life. And so what I mean by that is, if you have a sense of the purpose of my life is whatever it might be, to do this good deed, to achieve something in an area, to take care of this person in your family, if you feel like you are acting and behaving consistent with your highest aspiration, you like yourself and you're happy. So your happiness comes from doing what you believe is right, more so than seeking, you know, cheap thrills, temporary pleasures, which come and go and often leave regret. Okay, Helen Keller, you know, the famous blind lady, happiness comes from loyalty to a worthy purpose. Devote your life to a good purpose, make it a work of art. So that leads to happiness. And having a strong sense of purpose enables you to endure other things and to bounce back from them, to being resilient. So I like this quote here. This is from Viktor Frankl. The gas chambers were ultimately prepared in the lecture halls of nihilistic scientists and philosophers. Atheistic Darwinism is what leads to this sort of thing. The quest for meaning is the key to mental health. Meaning is strength. Our survival. He was a psychiatrist too, and I can tell you other psychiatrists came up with the same conclusions. Thomas Shaw's and other ones too. It's the meaning that helps a person bounce out of sadness, adversity, difficulties. Okay, so Dr. Frankl continues. Our survival may depend on our seeking it and finding it. If we can find some meaning to put at the center of our lives, even the worst suffering becomes bearable. Once an individual's search for meaning is successful, it not only renders him happy, but it enables him to have the capability to cope with suffering. You don't create your sense of meaning, you detect it. Life is not primarily a quest for pleasure, as Freud had believed. Or is it a quest for power, as Alfred Adler had taught and as Nietzsche had philosophized? But it is a quest for meaning. The greatest task for any person is to find meaning in their life. The salvation of a man is through love and in love. Love is the ultimate highest goal that a man can aspire to. The more one forgets himself by giving to a cause or to serve another person to love, the more human he is and the more he actualizes himself. Self-actualization is possible only as a side effect of self-transcendence. So I share that with you because that type of thinking, it makes you strong and it makes you able to endure. It makes you able, because in life, you don't tend to just move upward towards a successful accomplishment of a goal. You tend to go up 2 steps, get knocked back down a step or two, go up 2 steps, get knocked back down, go up, get knocked back down. So you have to be able to bounce back from all those knockdowns, sad disappointments and setbacks in order to eventually reach your goal. Okay. So here's a credibility meter for improving health with religion. It's been shown it dramatically improves health, okay? Here's a credibility meter for improving health with the vegan diet. Also really improves health, but there are some problems. You know, the high fat, you can do high fat vegan. I don't think that's a good idea. And, you know, in just a regular vegan diet, people are still eating fried food and oils and other processed food that's just processed plant foods. Those are not good for your health. So when I say vegan diet, what I really mean is low fat, low sodium, 100% vegan, 100% whole foods. You know, I only eat things with a single ingredient. As soon as there's a second ingredient, they can put stuff into that second ingredient that you don't want, and they don't even have to tell you. I also even think low protein is probably beneficial. That's a kind of a big topic. Certainly animal protein is definitely bad all around, but there is some reason to believe you don't want your plant protein to be that high. Now, I don't want to get into all the details of that. That requires a philosophical discussion. I actually gave a previous lecture on Chef Ages. You can look it up. It'll be something like, one was a skinny on fats, another one was how much protein do you need. So I'll go into all the details of that in those lectures. Okay, but that has great results. I don't say perfect because there are still potential problems. Even when you follow all this, you still have to be careful about a few other things. This just shows endothelial function. You'll have the nitric oxide is the most important thing, the vasodilator coming out. It inhibits platelets from clotting. It's a gas. It'll diffuse into the blood vessel and help prevent clotting into the capillary, for example. It'll diffuse into the wall of the artery and get the vascular smooth muscle cells to relax. That's what you want. And, you know, I went to the Dr. Esselstyn training course. And he kept going, nitric oxide this, nitric oxide that, nitric oxide this. And I'm like, well, what about this? What about this? What about this? And he goes, let me talk to you. I'll talk to you later. I'll talk to you at lunch. Okay. So then I met with him and we talked. And he's like, Pete, he said, the most important thing I'm trying to do here is make the patients understand they need to eat this healthy way to maintain nitric oxide. If they understand that, they get that, they will be successful. If they don't get that, they won't be successful. All this other stuff, it's just too much in one day. It'll confuse them. And so he's right. I mean, I can't help it. I always want to know all this other stuff, but he was absolutely right. I had that conversation with him. Here's a nitric oxide story. You eat nitrates in the plant food. There's a nitrate, it's NO3. On the back of your tongue, there's bacteria that convert into nitrite. This should actually be an I here. This should be nitrite, NO2. Okay. And then when it goes in your stomach, the stomach acid helps convert it to nitric oxide, just NO. It's absorbed from the stomach into the blood, travels throughout your body, having a systemic vasodilator effect. Systemic just means throughout the body. Okay, and sunshine's like that too. You've got nitric oxide precursors underneath your skin that are released when you walk out in the sun. That's why when you walk out in the sun, it feels so good. Okay, and you want to avoid things like F- toothpaste or mouthwash that could, kill the bacteria in the back of your tongue, and then they're not available to make this conversion. Okay, and I know it has to happen kind of quick. Chew your food, let it sit in your mouth a little while. Okay, and if you're on a PPI, proton pump inhibitors in your stomach, it'll decrease your stomach acid. You can also decrease this last step to go from NO2 to NO. So anyways, getting those nitrates, it helps to optimize your blood pressure and your blood flow to your tissues. Okay, and there's always a sort of a struggle between antioxidants versus oxidants. Okay, antioxidants are things that come from plant foods like vitamin C, beta carotene, and whatnot. And there's some intrinsic enzyme antioxidants inside your mitochondria, for example. And then you have your pro-oxidant things. F- is a pro-oxidant. Excessive free iron is a pro-oxidant. Fatty acid, lipid peroxides are pro-oxidative, and an oxidative thing is often an electron stealer. It'll steal an electron away from another molecule and it won't give it back. Okay, you get it from plants because plants have to sit out all day in the hot sun. Let's say it's 100 degrees out. The plant can't move, so the plant cannot respond to the heat by movement. Whereas the animal, the person, they go, it's too hot. I'll walk into the shade of the tree. So what I'm trying to say is if you eat meat, you don't get antioxidants, almost none. The animals use them up. But if you eat the plants will have antioxidants. And I think that's partly why we have color vision, is the antioxidants tend to be pigments. And we see them, we see when the fruit is ripe. Our color vision helps us that, a predatory carnivore animal, it doesn't need color vision. It mainly has good motion detectors to see when the prey is moving to chase it. Okay, here's what I meant earlier. The red blood cell is about 7 microns in diameter. Capillary is about 5 microns. RBC has to fold back on itself to form to fit through the capillary. So if it's stiffened, glycated, for example, it'll have more difficulty passing through there. Pressure goes up. If you got bridging molecules sticking the red blood cells together, stacking them up like a submarine sandwich, and high-fat diets will do this. The chylomicrons will do it. The LDL cholesterol will do it. Fibrinogen clotting protein will do this when you got leaky gut. Elevated uric acid from eating high fructose corn syrup will do it. Then they stick together. Now you got to pump this like submarine sandwich through the capillary. You're going to have to push it at higher pressure to get it through. So that's going to cause hypertension, and that's going to damage the arterial walls, and it's going to lead to atherosclerosis. The higher your LDL, the thicker your blood, the higher your blood pressure. Okay. The more predisposed you are. You can also get, I'm not going to get into all the nuance of this because we can get into nuance. What about if you're smoking cigarettes and taking a statin? Okay, the bottom line is you don't want to smoke cigarettes and you want to control your cholesterol by diet if you can. Okay, and most people can. Okay, a red blood cell has a negative charge on its outer surface called a zeta potential that repels other RB cells. That's what you want. RBC, so they don't stick together and clot. The bridging molecules, I just talked about them. IgM antibodies with an infection can do it. And these other things stick it together and make it worse. And they've shown this, Ansel Keys, showed that saturated fat was a big problem back in the 1950s, for example. So then people thought, well, maybe these cooking oils, omega-6 fats will be better, the PUFAs, polyunsaturated fatty acids. But it was shown that they cause just as much a problem or more of red blood cells sticking together, and even a more prolonged effect, predisposing you to atherosclerosis, angina, chest pain, coronary artery disease. Not good. Your ascending thoracic aorta is like a second heart. It's called the Windkessel effect, like that thing you blow air on a fire to sort of help kindle, get the fire going. So anyways, if you chronically overstretch your ascending thoracic aorta by hypertension due to high fat, high sodium diets, eventually you'll lose the elastic fibers in here, and you can't replace them after you've hit adulthood. So you'll lose that Windkessel effect, and you'll need to pump more blood during the initial phase of a heartbeat, the systolic contractile phase. Systole means contraction, like in Greek. So what I'm saying is you're going to lose your diastolic flow, and you'll thus need to compensate by increased systolic flow, and it leads to progressively worsening hypertension. Atherosclerosis tends to occur at bifurcations when the high blood pressure, hypertension is the main risk factor, and high cholesterol causes increased velocity of flow, hits the median divider between the branch point, and then it cycles back as turbulent, chaotic flow and retrograde eddy currents that confuses the endothelium, which is expecting more, antegrade flow, and it'll respond by releasing its antithrombotic glycocalyx, expressing prothrombotic molecules like VCAM, for example, and you form clots there. Okay, that's how atherosclerosis starts. And if you look at carotid CT angiograms, catheter angiograms, MRI, I see this all the time. This is where it starts. Okay, I see this every day. You don't get as much blood supply as you should to the brain. You can deplete the hippocampus of its adequate oxygen and glucose supply, and you can start losing brain cells from these areas. And that's a major cause of dementia. This is a Jack Delatorre theory. It's one of the great theories of dementia. He tied off mouse carotid arteries, and then on the same side of the brain, he did autopsies. Typically, the mouse will become demented about 2 months later. He first expected to see a big stroke on the same side. He tied off the carotid. Turned out it wasn't stroke. It was just shrunken. That's called atrophy. And the mechanism is you're losing brain cells due to the lack of oxygen and glucose, and they go into apoptosis, a gradual cell death, where the cell internal components can recycle itself. The plasma membrane doesn't lie, so you look at the brain MRI, you don't see anything except atrophic brain on the same side. Then you say, well, gee, what is it? Why is that a big deal? Not that many people have carotid occlusions. That's true, but lots of people have hypertension causing intracranial atherosclerosis, dropping the oxygen supply to the neurons, which can lead to something similar. It's also been called the vascular hypothesis of dementia. Lots of people have congestive heart failure, weak pumping to the brain. I call them mouse equivalents. AFib, lack of atrial filling, they can end up like the mouse. All right. If you got aortic regurgitation, aortic stenosis, post-cabbage, they put them on the heart-lung bypass pump and they run the pressure low so they don't bleed at the anastomoses. You can end up with an underperfused brain. Let's say you got hypertension. Why do you have blood pressure in the first place? To pump blood to the top of your brain, the cerebral cortex on the upper outer surface of your brain. Well, if you overtreat that hypertension, you're too aggressively treated with meds, you drop the pressure too low, you can underperfuse that part of the brain. Not good. Okay, so here's how the anatomy looks. You got the internal carotid artery comes up into the brain. There is an ACA, anterior cerebral artery. I'm not drawing it on here because it'd be too complicated, but I'm drawing the MCA, middle cerebral artery. The lenticulostriates are the small arteries that go up into this level, the basal ganglia level. There's basically three main levels of the brain. There's the basal ganglia of the supratentorial brain. So this is the upper part of the brain. The basal ganglia level, that's where the deep nuclei are. The corona radiata at the level of the lateral ventricles. And then above that is a centrum semiovale because it's in the center and it's shaped like an oval. That's why it's called centrum semiovale. Anyways, every day I look at these things and these lenticulostriates can get sheared off and injured by hypertension and they'll get strokes in this area, in the basal ganglia strokes. We typically call them lacunar. Lacunar means whole. So lacunar infarcts, okay? Up around the convexities, though, if you don't have adequate perfusion pressure or you've got atherosclerosis in these small vessels, you don't adequately perfuse this area here, right next to the ventricles, called the corona radiata, and in the centrum semiovale. And I see tons of little strokes in there. One patient can have 100 of them. Here's diabetes. With diabetes, here's a capillary. Here's a normal one. Here's a red blood cell passing through a capillary, and these little blue circles are the oxygen coming off. Here's a capillary basement membrane. Here's the smooth muscle cells, like next to the small vessels, pericytes in the brain around the capillaries. Anyways, the oxygen has to pass from the red blood cell into the tissue, into the neurons, the axons of the neuron here. And that uses that to make energy so it can function. All right, so what's my point? When you get diabetes, you get thickening of the plasma basement membrane here. With hypertension, you get thickening of the arterial wall, the smooth muscle. And you'll also get collagen laid down in response to injury, for example. Well, as the more you thicken this arterial wall, the harder it is for these oxygen. So there's a lot more blue circles up here than there is down here in the diseased vessel. So you get less oxygen in your tissues. That can add up over time and predispose you to increased risk of neuronal injury and death due to hypoxia, okay? And there's other factors that complicate that. I just want to show you a picture. Here's a good-looking brain. This is a healthy-looking brain. Normal-sized ventricles. There's no periventricular lesions. At the tips of the frontal horns, you'll get a little normal variation with aging, but there's none in the region of strokes. And the brain's tight. It's up close to the skull. Now here is pretty much of a typical looking brain, like a 75-year-old brain. Okay, you got atrophy. The brain tissue is shrunk away from the skull, the inner table of the skull. And all these, this is called a flare sequence. It's like a T2 sequence. All these spots that are bright white, hyperintense, we call it, these are all small strokes, often silent strokes that might not be overtly symptomatic, but these are the patients that are progressively cognitively slowing down. And sometimes they'll be overtly, weak, weak on one side of the body, hemiplegia and whatnot. But these little things will just keep adding up until they become demented. Most common thing that I see is atrophy, not that much of this, okay? But this is super common, so I just show it to you. You don't want this happening. I see tons of this. I see it all day, every day. And one patient can have like 100 of these little white spots or more. Okay, how does a neuron work? It has an action potential, an electrical impulse that travels from the cell body region, where the nucleus is, down to the synaptic terminal. And it's conducted by sodium channels through the main part of the axon, the elongated part of the neuron. And then voltage-gated calcium channels are opened in the synaptic terminal. When the calcium floods into the cytoplasm, it causes the cell to release its neurotransmitter. The synaptic vesicles containing neurotransmitters. They travel to the synaptic cleft here, the plasma membrane, at the site of the synapse. Synapse is the connection between the pre and the postsynaptic neuron. The neurotransmitter vesicle fuses with the plasma membrane. Neurotransmitter travels across the cleft and exerts an effect on the postsynaptic neuron. Okay, but this is the big event when calcium is elevated in the synaptic terminal. That's what will cause it to release this neurotransmitter. So in order to handle calcium, you got to have a good functional system of potassium, sodium, and magnesium, because that maintains an electrochemical potential across the neuronal plasma membrane. You need magnesium to control the ATP. I'll explain that in a moment. And that's why you want to get your eating correct. Plant foods have lots of potassium, lots of magnesium. That's what you want. That's what our bodies are designed to eat. That's what our ancestors ate. Modern diet, though, is high in sodium. Plant-based diet's low in sodium. Modern diet's high in sodium because it's a preservative and it tastes good, okay? Well, if you eat tons of sodium and very little potassium, magnesium, as most modern people do with their SAD diets and whatnot, then you damage, you dissipate this gradient here, and you need this gradient because it facilitates the ability to pump calcium out of a cell. And if you'll start accumulating calcium in the cell cytoplasm, predisposing it to becoming hyperactive. You don't want that. Okay, and this guy, Richard Moore, MD, PhD, devoted his whole life to studying these ion pumps and potassium, calcium, and sodium. He found that you want to eat at least 5 times as much potassium as you do sodium. He called this the K-factor ratio. He says, hey, it should be at least 5 to 1. I think our ancestors probably ate about 25 to 1. Our body's made to handle that, and you'll be unlikely to become hypertensive. And the body keeps a total amount of these things constant because you have to balance all your cations, positively charged ions. And one of my doctor friends said to me, he goes, when I saw this, he said, it was like an epiphany. What I realized was this is such complex physiology that the human body is so much smarter than we are. And we're kidding ourselves if we think we can control things just right, like the conductor of an orchestra, when the body's better at doing it itself. The only smart option is just give yourself the right food and the body will conduct its own orchestra as best as can be possibly done. For us to kind of come along and try to do it is really a distant second choice. Here's adenosine, ATP, adenosine triphosphate, 1,2,3 phosphates. And these have a big, powerful negative charge on them that wants to pull away from each other. That's why donating one generates energy. But the point is, in order to hold them, it's like holding 2 bucking broncos next to each other. You need a positively charged magnesium. So that's why you need magnesium for these ATP reactions, because it holds the phosphates in place until they're ready to be used to catalyze a reaction. So you need magnesium. Where is magnesium? I'll show you on the next slide where magnesium is. Magnesium is located in the center of chlorophyll in your plant food. So you eat your plant foods, you get your magnesium. Okay. Lots of Americans, it's a very common nutritional deficiency. People are just basically deficient in the things you get from plants. They're deficient in magnesium. They tend to be deficient in potassium. They tend to be deficient in fiber, and they tend to be deficient in nitrates and antioxidants, all from plant foods because they don't eat a lot of plants. So just eat the plants. Okay, this is just a little bit more detailed drawing showing that you have electrochemical gradients. It's electric because you have a negative 65 millivolt charge inside the cell, and that's because you're pumping more positive charge out than positive charge in. And you have a chemical gradient, meaning the concentration, for example, sodium 10 times higher outside the cell than inside the cell. And you go with that gradient. You use the energy of that gradient to pump calcium out. So you need these things working well. And the way they work well is that you eat what you're supposed to. You eat your plant food that's got the correct amount of potassium, the correct amount of magnesium, the correct amount of sodium, and all this stuff functions a lot better. Okay, this is, again, just a more complicated drawing in the context of glutamate. Glutamate's the most important, like 90% of brain neurotransmitter. It's excitatory, causes an increase in activity of the postsynaptic neuron. And I'm not going to go into more detail of this, but I can just tell you it all comes down to how is cytoplasm calcium handled, okay? And then once you want to turn the cell off, well, I was going to show you, here's how you turn a cell off. You need to pump calcium out of the cytoplasm. You can pump it from the cytoplasm into the extracellular matrix, or you can pump it into something called the endoplasmic reticulum. This is the endoplasmic reticulum. It's up next to the nucleus, and it's a calcium storage reservoir inside of a neuron. And so,
Dr. Rogers, excuse me, I just want to make sure we have time for questions because we've been going almost 2 hours.
Oh, I didn't know. I thought we were okay.
Yeah,
I thought I was gonna know 90. Okay, sorry about that. Yeah. All right. So
okay.
bottom line is calcium and magnesium got to be. Now here's one thing I'll show you is I went through all my biochemistry books. I own like 7 textbooks of biochemistry. I couldn't find anything about mitochondrial inhibition. Okay. This is a super important topic. I knew about that it existed because I read about it in some different papers. So then For example, in the Brownlee paper, fat inhibits complex 3. All right. And anyways, then I started going through the literature and I quickly found over 50 mitochondrial inhibitors. This is super important because there's a mitochondrial theory of aging. Some people think it's the main reason we age. There's mitochondrial theories of neurodegeneration. That's my theory, the Peter Rogers neurovascular uncoupling theory of neurodegeneration. There's an expansion of the calcium hypothesis, excitotoxin hypothesis. Mitochondria are the key thing. And what is this O'Neill guy, brilliant biochemist, saying about the immune system? He says it comes down to what's happening in the mitochondria. So what I'm saying is, without even realizing it, lots of these mitochondrial inhibitors are really common. Statins are a mitochondrial inhibitor. SSRI, serotonin selective reuptake inhibitors, antidepressants are mitochondrial inhibitors quite often, and a lot of other common chemicals. Tylenol, okay? Antifungals, the mold inhibitors in all your processed food, and there's a whole bunch more of them, okay? So you want to avoid this. Okay, these are things associated with circuit dysfunction. So SERCA is sarcoplasmic endoplasmic reticulum calcium ATPase. That's the way to pump calcium in endoplasmic reticulum. Lots of these things are common, okay? If you get too much glutamate across the synapse, you overexcite the postsynaptic neuron and it'll die. That's called apoptosis due to excitotoxicity. And so what I'm showing is this is knowable, it's doable. And this is my theory of neurovascular uncoupling. Basically, you got a baseline metabolic rate in a neuron, and you have a baseline glucose oxygen delivery. All right. So you have to keep those coupled. If the metabolic rate goes up, you got to increase the oxygen glucose delivery so the neuron can meet its demands to produce ATP, energy. If you drop the oxygen and glucose delivery due to atherosclerotic stenosis, congestive heart failure, atrial fibrillation, overtreated hypertension, or atherosclerosis, plugging up the arteries, high-fat meals, you run the risk that this neuron is going to go in apoptosis because it's going to have trouble meeting its metabolic demands. If you give a stimulant like caffeine, sleep deprivation, excessive psychological stress, glyphosate, aspartame, then its metabolic rate goes up. And if it don't get enough oxygen and glucose, it might start dying, going into apoptosis because it can't meet those demands, like a kid being given amphetamines, for behavior issues. So you don't want that, all right? So that's my P. Rogers theory of neurovascular uncoupling. What you want to do is eat like the Spartan Vegan diet. And this is basically the same diet recommended by Chef AJ, recommended by Dr. McDougall, by Caldwell Esselstyn, a low-fat, plant-based diet. And get the psychological stuff straight. We talked about primarily starches, but also fruits and veggies. Take a B12. Here's just a food plate of the Spartan Vegan food plate. So anyways, that's basically it. I hope that was helpful. That's it.
I love your drawings.
Thanks.
Okay. You must prepare for these for hours. I mean, there's just so much research.
Well, it's kind of fun. And also, it's a little bit of a row your boat technique. I keep all my old slides and I see combinations, I see patterns. And the way I do it is I just get an idea. I get a feeling. I go, hey, that reminds me of Antaeus wrestling Hercules. That reminds me of, some other painting, the Don Quixote paintings, I'm currently listening to Don Quixote in my car right now. So it puts me in a good mood. I go, that fits. So I just get this feeling and I go with it,
I never heard the Beethoven joke before. That was funny.
Yeah.
I'm happy to know that you're also always cold, because people always tell me it's because I'm thin, and I am thin now, but I wasn't always thin and I still was always cold. What do we do about it? I mean, I lived in the desert. That was great. But now I'm in Northern California and I am always cold.
Well, I always dress warm. I have extra clothes on. I'm wearing a dress shirt, but I got a shirt underneath. I always wear at least one shirt underneath or a sweatshirt. And like I said, I got a lot of fat meat eaters in my family who always want, the air conditioner on. So, I'm outnumbered. So I got to wear, all this extra stuff. And I just in the habit of doing it. And I like it because it improves immune function. And also I spend a lot of time challenging myself. How can I lift more weights when I'm in the weight room? How can I accomplish a task? Because I don't have a lot of free time. Like, let's say I want to write a book chapter. I'll say to myself, okay, I must write this book chapter today on diabetes. So I'll kind of be working up towards it. Let's say on Saturdays, my plan is to finish that book chapter. I'll get up early in the morning. I will crank. The reason I'm going into this is that I push myself. I know what works and doesn't work for me to generate a lot of productivity. And I know that if I keep myself real warm and I sit right at my desk, as soon as I wake up, I can crank out a book chapter in a day. And whatever it takes, I can do it. If it takes 10 hours, fine. If it takes 12 hours, fine. I know that I can stay mentally sharp and concentrate, because a lot of people can't do that in my experience. They can't concentrate, they can't focus, whereas I know what I'm doing works.
So are you saying if we're cold, it will improve our immune function?
Yes. And I think the reason is the way the immune system works is when an invading, let's say, toxin gets across, a bacteria gets across that epithelial barrier, or let's say it's a cancer cell in the body, and they do move around, some of them. the immune system has to find a match. What is the cell that has a matching receptor on its external surface to remove the cancer cell, to remove the bacteria? So they have to travel all around the body, and they travel through the lymphatics, then they go through the blood, back through the lymphatics. So they're constantly circulating around, and there's like billions of them, and they have to find it. It's all by braille, so to speak. They have to find the matching cell, the matching bacteria, the matching cancer cell that fits the receptor. They're PRRs, pattern recognition receptors. Okay. And what I'm saying is, when the person's warm, they circulate faster. When the person exercises, they circulate faster. So it improves immune function. And I just know that, enzymes work a little bit better when you're warm. You don't want to be so warm that you're sweating like crazy necessarily. You can also sweat out toxins. I just want to be warm enough that I feel warm. And I just know from experience, I got tons of experience in cranking out books and other things, and doing academic work that energized me. Like I've had to write entire papers in one day, where I only got one day. I get all the preliminary materials ready in folders, and then I get up at 6 o'clock on a Saturday morning, and I'll pop it out. And so what I'm trying to say is, I know if I'm warm, I can force myself to do that. Whereas if I don't feel good, if I'm all cold, then, I just know from experience that's what works.
Yeah. Whenever we attend conferences, they always keep the room so cold for me.
Yeah, I don't like that. I don't like being cold. So that's why I say I'll always wear, like usually when I'm at work, I'll wear a t-shirt underneath and then a sweatshirt on top of that, and then my dress shirt, and so I want to be warm. I just know from experience I can work way better if I'm warm.
I'm a lizard. Thank you. I don't feel so alone. I liked your reference to John Candy. When I was in acting class, I 2 scenes, only 2 times in all those years did I get a standing ovation. And once was when I was doing that role, playing the planes, trains, and automobile role as John Candy. I'll never forget that. That was a funny movie. Okay, so here's a question that was sent in advance from Richard. And he said that, Dr. Rogers, a few months ago, you talked about avoiding electronics like computers in the bedroom when going to sleep. The thing is, I used to sleep with a fan because I like the sound. Now I sleep with brown noise from my computer. I have it playing this relaxing sound all night just for the noise. It seems to be relaxing to me. Are these kind of electronics okay? Since I have the light dimmed, it's tough for me to sleep with complete silence for some reason.
I would keep them farther from the bed so you don't get any electromotive force off them, EMF. One thing that's kind of nice for so-called white noise at night is I like air filters. You can have like a HEPA air filter, and that way you get the benefit of the white noise, but you also get, better air purification simultaneously. And I keep it far from the bed, but I noticed it works. It makes sort of a pleasant noise, and it's also filtering the air, because I think the air pollution is an under-recognized cause of health problems.
Thanks. Actually, I do have one by my bed, and you're right, it does make a little noise. Vicky says, Dr. Rogers has said he eats starch, fruit, vegetables, and beans, and actually has a YouTube on the topic. But I would love to see some pictures of what he eats or how he or his long-suffering wife prepares his food.
Yeah, I guess I could do a lecture on that in the future. But yeah, I'm real simple. I eat a lot of rice, beans, potatoes, sweet potatoes, and the beans are kind of like sauce. Like I like those orange lentils, for example, or whatever. They're all pretty good. And then I'll a lot of times knock down a bunch of blueberries, and then depending on what's available, sometimes there'll be cauliflower or broccoli or something else like that, or watermelon. I'll eat that fine, but those are sort of my mainstays, and I usually try to get a salad every night.
Yeah, well, you're a simple man who's always cold. Okay. And the second part of her question is, she says she has a sister with type 2 diabetes, and her sister insists her diabetes is due to a virus some years back. She's insulin dependent and eats what the dietitian tells her. And she says that, Vicky wants to know, can a virus really cause type 2 diabetes?
I don't know. I sort of mentioned that in my lamplight fallacy slide, that there's a tendency in medicine to say everything is due to aging, genetics, and viruses. And there's a reason why they do that, is because that means that there's nothing you can do about it. Most diabetes is due to high-fat diets. There's also a lot omega-6 cooking oils with secondary lipid peroxidation. There's other things that are toxic too to the pancreas, aluminum, for example, which is in tap water pretty routinely. So what I would do, let's say I had type 2 diabetes. If I thought it was type 2 diabetes, insulin dependent, I'd first of all try to figure out, was I really insulin dependent? I would try to optimize things as much as I possibly could I would avoid all those things that are causing insulin resistance. You got to work with your doctor too. If you already got diabetes, you got to work closely with your doctor to make sure, because when you change your diet, if you eat your old-fashioned dosages of medication, they're based on probably a high-fat diet, you'll be over-treating your diabetes, and you could drop your blood sugar too low, and that can make you pass out. A dangerous thing if you're driving or something, or even just syncopal episode to faint, you could injure yourself. So you got to do it gradually. You got to work with your doctor. But I would try to find out, because there's been some people who, even though they've had diabetes for decades, they've been able to reverse it all once they went low-fat vegan. Roy Taylor is a pretty famous guy. He won the Banting Award in 2012. He got patients to lose 30 pounds or more weight, and their fatty liver went away, and their diabetes was cured. Virtually all those patients who had diabetes 4 years or less. So what I'm trying to say is, before I would accept having to take all these pills every day the rest of my life, I would see if I could possibly reverse it just with this diet stuff. And I would walk a lot more after eating, because when you walk, you increase insulin sensitivity, get the glucose to go into your muscles after eating postprandial. So I would try to do all that and see if I could cure myself. Maybe it's possible, maybe it's not, but it's certainly worth a try. It requires that the individual is motivated. And I can also tell you, you got to be careful, I think, with a lot of dietitians. They mean well, but a lot of them, they went to a school that was funded by big food. And because I had the dietitian friends, and some of them know a lot, but a lot of them too, they've had this biased education where they think, like, they would tell me high fructose corn syrup's okay, and olive oil's okay, and other things like that. I wasn't impressed by their nutrition knowledge.
Well, Dr. Rogers, this was another wonderful talk. Next week is Father's Day. What do you have planned? Anything special?
I'm pretty passive, What I've noticed is women tend to control all the social stuff. So I'll see what's planned for me, and I'll just go along with it. I don't got a lot of energy for that stuff. And so it'll be nice, but I don't think too much about stuff like that.
Maybe you can ask for the air conditioner to be turned.
Yeah, for one day.
For one day. Okay. Thank you so much, Dr. Rogers.
Thanks.
And thanks all of you for watching another episode of Chef AJ Live. Please come back tomorrow at 11 a.m. Pacific time for Plant-Based Classics with Lauren Bernick, and she's going to be making easy enchiladas and Spanish rice. Thanks, everyone.